So we were in the third edition of the theory or whatever we wanted to develop, whatever we are trying to develop, so as to say. And if you recall, we had reached the end of last session and we had concluded certain things. And we had in fact talked about certain models of ethics, so as to say, or
Correct.
models in which like the frameworks, mental frameworks in which we have to talk about ethics. And now one of the main ingredients or one of the main agendas of this particular podcast slash recording is going to be to outline why utility maximization
Hmm.
implies that we should be on the path of active excellence. If you remember, there are three
Right. Yeah.
states of being that a
Yeah.
human being can generally be in, and they are interestingly, today morning only I was reading upon this, they are interestingly very closely correlated with regions in the brain also, and they are also very interestingly correlated closely with our molecules like neurotransmitters and hormones as well, basically.
Acha. Okay.
So let's talk about that. Like we generally say that, okay, what is the requirement of a human being? One model is the hierarchy of needs, the pyramid shaped Maslow hierarchy of needs, basically. So it
Correct.
starts from basic like safety, physiological needs, then safety, security needs, and then love, belonging, and self-esteem, and finally self-actualization. And then people have granularly broken them down as self-actualization can be growth, transcendence, etc., etc. Like
Acha.
so on and so forth. Yeah. So I was going through some of this literature as well. Now, according to what we are postulating, there are models, and models are not the reality. Like models are the map, basically, you can say, and map
Right.
is not the actual reality, because a map will have to be as detailed as the actual reality in order for it to be 100% accurate. So
Correct.
mental models are like maps, basically. They are not
Correct.
exactly perfectly like the one-on-one mappings of reality. They are somewhat, you can say, there is going to be somewhat amount of obfuscation. So the detail in the mental model is somewhat going to be less than the detail that reality holds. But
Right.
then again, we have to also note that human intellectual bandwidth is also limited.
Hmm.
So that means this reduction of detail is not only
Necessary.
a
Hmm.
means it's not a bug, basically it's a feature, you can say. So not
Hmm.
only is it necessary, it is crucially necessary, I would say.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because if you are going to focus upon things that are happening in extreme amount of detail, then you will find that your mental bandwidth and mental acuity is insufficient enough to focus upon other things. So I used to make this mistake back in the day, like many years ago, that I used to think about, okay, if somebody is working for me as an employee or or working with me as a business partner or associate, I used to go very micro into their psychology, basically, because I can visualize things, and I have the habit of thinking about how they think and how they work and so on and so forth. So
Right.
I used to go micro on, okay, what would be their motivation levels, what I can do to incentivize them further, then
Right.
what more can be done, like how can they be upskilled, how can I make sure that the ergonomic work environment around them is good, so on and so forth, how can I
Hmm.
make sure that they are also on a path of growth along with me and the company, and so on and so forth. So this is too much micro detailing. I was never a micromanager. I will not go into the micromanagement as such, basically,
Yeah.
but I used to go into micro detailing. So you can
Correct.
say that, okay, you can think like this, that currently there are so many cells in the human body. There are various different types of cells. So some kind of cells will be doing this kind of functioning. So you can think about, okay, mitochondria will be there, then Golgi bodies will be there, so on and so. So you can zoom into it now. So you will find that as we are zooming down into the micro, now you have limited intellectual bandwidth, so you can't focus upon the extra macros, basically, of other
Right.
things.
Right.
That happens. So
Hmm.
this feature of obfuscating some part out and approximating reality as mental models, and in this process losing some amount of detail, is not only necessary, but it is crucially necessary, it is vitally necessary for us to be able to do well in the intellectual arenas of life, basically.
Correct.
So
Correct.
if we are too detail oriented and too micro oriented, then it so happens that, PhDs usually, they are extremely micro zooming into one field of knowledge, right? And
Hmm.
you might be knowing one statistics that 90 to 95% of published literature by PhD students and postdoctoral research fellows, It's
Right.
never read and never utilized thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it is never read and never utilized. So what are like basically you can say that it is an AWL based, like auction winners loss based, extravagant utilization of human brain power, and it's not going anywhere. Means
Hmm.
that automatically implies that what 90 to 95% of PhDs and researchers are doing is never going to be utilized by humanity.
Right.
One could argue that the remaining 5% comes from this 100% only, and we don't know which is going to be utilized and what part is not going to be utilized. But that argument is only semi-valid, basically. Even
Okay.
granting the validity of that argument, also, we could reduce 80% of the effort, basically. But
Hmm. Hmm.
since human sociology exists in various different states, so the current state of affairs as far as academic research is concerned is this, that whoever is the professor or like whoever is the authority over there, they have a certain set of areas of interest. So they try to push the students into that particular area of interest. So the
Okay.
students are not really very free to choose, basically. It's like that.
Okay. Okay.
Second thing is like the funding process in academia. In
Hmm.
general, what happens is like that funding process has agendas, which may be more selfish agendas rather than agendas that are actually aimed at doing good or the highest good for the world, basically. So
Hmm.
you can say that humanity is in this sociological state, H1, and let's say humanity wants to move towards H2. Let's say this is a vector. Humanity wants to move towards H2, let's assume. Okay. So
Hmm.
the state of affairs might be such that humanity is moving towards H3, let's say. So there will
Right.
be some component. So I am explaining this as vector theory. So there will be
Right.
some component of H1, H3 that will be making humanity move towards H2 as well. But
Correct.
there will be some component that will be making humanity move in an
Away from.
orthogonal direction compared to H2 as well, basically.
Right. Right.
And as we have seen in earlier ethical models in general, that orthogonal direction is the worst actually.
Hmm.
Orthogonal direction is the worst. So it's either like you move towards H2, or if you're not moving towards H2, try to stay at H1 and try to not move away from H2, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try to, because if you are thinking about, let's say, two cities, let's say this is city one and let us say this is city two. Okay. So if you stay at city one, then you are still closer to city two compared to moving orthogonally.
Correct.
Think.
Correct. Yeah.
Compared to
Yeah.
moving orthogonally. Even going backward also will be worse. But the worst is moving orthogonally, because as you move
Yeah.
orthogonally, you are shifting like sociological reality. That happens basically. So you are
Hmm.
not only affecting you. See, the thing is this, that if you are moving backwards, then you are affecting yourself mainly. So you are
Yeah.
deserving less, obtaining less. That kind of a thing happens basically. But if you are
Okay.
moving orthogonally, okay,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
means not only are you skewing up your own processes, but you are skewing up sociology as well, basically.
Right. Okay.
It's like that. So,
Uh-huh.
for example, criminals who don't get charged for their crime and keep
Hmm.
on being criminals, like example is Bernie Madoff, like, or Theranos, who was Elizabeth Holmes, basically. So
Right.
conduct, or like let's say Vijay Mallya, who stole like
Hmm.
multi-crore from the Indian public in general. Yes. So
Hmm.
basically, now we are trying to inspire or develop that particular theory, and we are also trying to develop efficiency models, basically, right?
Okay. Right.
Okay. So
Okay.
we are trying to inspire a reality or a possibility wherein which we want to give the best possible theoretical reasoning as to why chasing excellence and being active is the best possible way to derive utility as a human being.
Right.
That is what we are trying to do. So
Correct.
again, repeating that there are three modes of being, basically. Okay.
Yeah.
The three modes. In fact, I should go back to that.
You can go back to that page. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
These are the three modes, basically.
Correct. Passive, mediocre, and active.
Yeah. And if let us say, if you want to change the word mediocre, like we can say moderate,
Okay.
moderate, basically, right?
Right. Right.
So, so firstly, it is not possible for any human being who lives a long life to be in only one of the three modes at all times, basically.
Hmm. Okay.
So we are talking about ratio and proportion.
Right. Okay.
Somebody who is very active, that means, like, let's say most of their waking hours they are very active. That is what
Right.
it means, basically.
Okay. Okay.
It does
Right.
not mean that at 100% of the times they are active. It's not possible for a human being, because human being needs rest, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
not only the sleep, in waking hours also the human being needs rest.
Correct.
The second mode is mediocre slash moderate mode, basically. Temperate, moderate mode, basically, so as to say.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
third mode is passive mode. So
Passive.
sometimes we need to be in the passive mode as well, because guess what? Passive mode breeds creativity. So
Okay. Okay.
sometimes passive mode can be actually very useful,
Okay. Okay.
right now. So
Hmm.
it's not true that always being in the active mode is most efficient.
Okay.
So what we are talking about over here is mostly, basically. So if we say that
Right.
a person is active, that means they are mostly active. If we
Okay.
say that the person is moderate in their effort or zeal towards life, then
Hmm.
we can say that they are mostly moderate, basically. Doesn't mean that there weren't active phases in their life or passive phases in their life.
Right.
And if we say that a person is passive, that means they are mostly passive as far as their zeal or enthusiasm towards life is concerned. That
Correct.
doesn't mean that there weren't active phases or moderate phases in their life, basically.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
right?
Right. Right.
So, what we are purporting or what we are trying to establish is that the most appropriate way to be is active and ethical,
Ethical.
basically.
Correct.
So as to say virtuous, basically. Virtuous as well as active. All right. Now, if you think about it, this is a very difficult question to answer, because what would you say to a person who says that, no, I have a lot of money, I have been lucky, basically, in life. Okay. I have been lucky. I am a trust fund kid, or I am the son of a millionaire, or something like that. Okay. I have been lucky, and now I will just relax.
Hmm.
Even actors and people who are generally good looking because of genetics. So people who have won the genetic lottery, or who have won the resourcial lottery, resource based lottery, as far as hereditary acquisition of resources is
Right.
concerned. So people who have won these two things, basically, what do we say to them? They are lucky, and they are just chilling, you can say.
Correct.
They were lucky and they are just chilling. So why is that state of being not the highest utility state of being for them? It's very difficult to answer this question for this particular category of human individuals, basically, if you
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
See, if somebody is uh, generally speaking on the moderate spectrum as far as resources are concerned, in resources, I basically mean to say three types of default resources. One is
Okay.
like the literal resources, or money or wealth that
Hmm.
you inherit as a person. Second is your genetics, because of which you get looks,
Right.
essentially.
Okay.
Looks and
Right. Right.
the third is your intellect and intelligence, basically.
Right. Right. Okay. Right.
So some component of intellect and intelligence also has to be genetic, basically. Like,
Correct. Yeah.
see, there are three axes on which humans and human outcomes depend. Like, one is the biological axis, like I am revising earlier what we
Mm-hmm.
have talked about.
Correct. Yeah.
One is the biological axis, one is the sociological axis, which also involves epigenetics. Also, epigenetics means the same set of genes in different sociological environments and climatic environments uh, adapt and give different responses, basically, and
Right.
different responses to stimuli, environmental stimuli in general. And the third one is the individual axis, basically, right? So, if you think about it, this is a very difficult question. This is a very difficult question to
Hmm.
answer. That why is this ethically active mode?
Right.
Why is this the best type of mode for any human being to be in, basically, right?
Correct. Hmm.
But this question becomes very simple if human life was infinite. I will explain.
Okay.
If
Okay.
if human life did not end,
Hmm.
then this is a very simple question to answer, because whoever is not being ethical, right, they will be caught on one day or the other, and they will be
Right.
brought, like, then the law of
Correct.
karma or etc will take shape, basically, and
Hmm.
sociologically they will suffer more.
Yes.
So
Right.
a player who is a cheater in the game of life, basically,
Hmm.
will
Hmm.
sociologically suffer more,
Right.
and they will be caught, basically, because they
Right.
haven't been ethical. Okay.
Hmm.
Now,
Correct.
generally speaking, the religious theories of the world, like all the main religions of the world, like
Hmm.
Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, etc., Judaism, etc. They try to solve this by some notion of afterlife or some
Yeah.
karmic notion, basically, generally
Right.
speaking. Because
Right. Right.
if you think about it, in the process of what can be called as seeking or spiritual inquiry, like, these are generally not my words, but in the process, see, human beings always try to wonder what this life is about.
Hmm.
And after they acquire their basic resources, and after they have some room for thinking or more thinking, you can say, they try to seek knowledge and try to be on what we can call as a spiritual conquest, in order to
Hmm.
try to find meaning in this life, basically.
Correct.
So
Correct.
one consequence of what we are developing over here is also to give the best possible mental models for developing meaning in a
Hmm.
person's life,
Hmm.
right? Now hereby, because of the default comparisonitis muscle, because of the default greed, envy, lust, gluttony, these
Hmm.
type of, see, greed, envy, lust, gluttony is like want type of sins, no, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. Sloth is like laziness type of sin.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like that. Pride is like, I am too great, like vain pride, that kind of a sin,
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm.
Yeah. So basically, this want, selfishness. See, greed, envy, lust, gluttony are all want based. You can think about it.
Hmm.
So you can just categorize this as selfishness based sins, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Pride is like social status based sin, basically. Because even if
Hmm.
a human being is so great, they have got nothing to be proud about, basically. Because if given the same resources, other human beings can also possibly like reach the
Correct.
same level that
Correct. Correct.
that particular human being has reached, right?
Correct. Correct.
And like sloth is like more like a lust based sin, you can say. Sorry, sloth is
In
more like a laziness
passive.
based.
Laziness based. Yeah.
Passive.
Hmm.
Passive. And wrath is again sociological. You can see, pride and wrath are correlated. Can you see?
Okay.
Pride,
Okay.
pride
Ah.
and wrath are correlated, basically, because you feel that you have been wronged or something like that, or you feel that somebody took away something that belonged to you. So pride is
Hmm.
also something like that only. Pride is like sociological status signaling based. you
Right. Right.
you feel that you are at a certain hierarchy in the social structure, and then if that hierarchy is challenged, then that is where your pride gets hurt, basically, something like that.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
So it's like closely linked with ego. So you can say, like, if we are going to move beyond the framework of the seven sins, so ego, pride, wrath are all kind of trying to put others down, if you think about it.
Right. Okay.
And the four selfishness based sins, like gluttony, lust, those four, basically, what they try to do is they try to acquire more and more greed, envy. They try
Hmm.
to acquire more and more resources for oneself. In fact, I'll
Right.
write that down also. So one is selfishness based,
Yeah.
and other is also kind of sociological, in the sense that it tries to put others down, basically, so as to
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
right? So you can say, on our axis in general, where would the sins be located? So greed, lust, envy. You can
Right.
even club envy with pride and wrath also, because envy also is kind of related to sociological hierarchy, right?
Huh. Huh.
So as to
Correct.
say,
How can
yeah,
that person get more than me? Huh. Yeah. That
correct.
makes sense.
So
Correct.
envy can be there also. So you can say wrath. So you can even say envy and pride are kind of very correlated, basically,
Hmm.
because you cannot be envious unless you are prideful.
Hmm. Right.
Means you are envying because you somewhere think that you deserve that, basically,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
somewhere your subconscious mind thinks that you deserve that particular car, that particular mate, that particular set of things that the other person has, so on and so forth. Now,
Hmm.
if you did not think only that you also deserve, let us say that thought was only not there, then you will not feel envious.
Hmm. Correct.
Think about it. Like, so they are, these are correlated, basically, and envy comes in both the places, and that's fine. So this is selfishness based, and this is, you can say, putting others down based. So sociological hierarchy or social
Right.
hierarchy. social status based,
Status
so as to
based.
say. And this one thing, sloth, it kind of lies over here, because then if you are slothful, then you are also suffering and you are not obtaining anything. Means your deservance is also not high and obtainance is
Right.
also not high, basically.
Right.
So
Yeah. Right.
you, you can potentially put sloth over here as well, basically, because sloth is not really doing anything to your deservance. You can say deservance is not really going down, but your obtainance is definitely going down.
Hmm.
Yeah, and even though deservance and obtainance may
Hmm.
not exactly be correct words in English, but we are going to use them because they make
Correct.
sense.
Correct. I mean,
Hmm.
in a sense, your deservance also does go down, right? Because you're not really contributing.
Say again.
Doesn't deservance also go down anyway? Like because since you're
Yeah,
not contributing.
not contributing keeps you at the same location, na, in general, basically. Opportunity cost wise, it goes down,
Correct. Correct.
basically.
Correct. 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 Huh. Yeah.
But in
Right.
general, unless you are doing something bad for the world, if you are
Negative.
not
Huh.
doing anything, let's say if you are not doing anything, basically,
Huh.
then it's like you are kind of at the same location. But if you
Correct.
are doing, literally, if you are doing actively bad for the world for selfish interest, then that is exactly when deservance kind of goes
Huh.
down.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So you're keeping it at zero, huh? Not negative.
Yeah,
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
kind of. Unless you are lazy and hence you are doing some shitty things and things like that, like
Mhm.
accepting a bribe from a politician or something like that, basically, in
Right.
exchange of votes, etc.
Right.
So these scenes, you can say, are mostly fall towards the left end of the spectrum, basically. And by left end, we mean to say anything that kind of lies below this line, basically, or like towards the
Hmm.
left of this line, kind of a thing.
Right.
So sloth is kind of an exception. Sloth like just
Hmm.
reduces your obtainance, basically. You can just say that. But mostly sloth, people who are lazy are not just lazy; they are also very susceptible to the other sins. People
Right.
who are
Okay.
lazy are also susceptible to the other sins, basically. So it
Hmm.
takes it takes effort and energy and active effort in order to do good things in the world. It
Hmm.
takes it's very easy to slide down on the slippery slope towards addiction and towards dopaminism and towards the other sins, basically, if
Right.
you are lazy as a person.
Hmm.
So that happens. Like
Right.
this is the landscape that we are drawing. Okay.
Right. Right.
Now there are various different factions of humanity, right?
Hmm.
See, most humans. So one statistics that is true as of 2023. If
Right.
USD, if a person is earning to their name USD $30,000 USD, yeah, thirty thousand
30,000.
dollars,
Okay.
then they are in the top 1% of the global economy, top 1%.
Acha. Okay. Okay.
So that
Right.
comes out to be around 24.5 lakh rupees, basically,
Acha.
approximately. Yeah,
Okay. Income, right?
yeah.
This is by income, है ना?
Income. This is
Annual income.
yearly income, basically. This
हाँ,
is
हाँ.
yearly income. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that is 2L per month, basically. So if somebody
Oh.
has achieved that level, then they are in the top 1%, right?
Hmm.
And then since everything is an exponential distribution curve, right? Everything is a Pareto, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
because of that, the next 1% is going to be just at, you can say, even 10 lakhs or 12 lakhs, basically, instead of
Right.
25.
Right. Right.
So it's not like 25 lakhs, hai, so like 23 lakhs pay, or it will be the next 1%. No, nothing like that, basically.
Correct.
Like
Correct. Yeah.
it will be significantly lower. And
Yes.
then
Yes.
it's like almost like if you are earning 5 lakhs or something like that, you are in the top 10% of the world, something like that. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think 5 lakhs to almost people are earning only. Like at least people who are currently in our sociological vicinity are earning. Okay.
Correct.
So
Correct.
this will seem to be a very arrogant statement kind of a thing coming from us, because then we are not in contact with those 90% of people.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So, but there are those people basically who
Hmm.
kind of live a hand to mouth subsistence and hand to mouth
Correct.
existence, etc.
Correct.
And according to me, even 2L per month is also not that great, basically, as far as the aspirational needs of a human being are concerned.
Hmm.
Not
Hmm.
talking about any particular human being, what a human being in general wants. And this is not even bringing in comparisonitis as of now. So even without bringing in comparisonitis, just on
Hmm.
an absolute scale, whatever a
Hmm.
human being wants to do in order to, reach self-actualization or be mostly in the state of self-actualization, etc., it
Right.
is still it is still not enough, according to
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
basically, right?
Right.
Because that human being may want to travel a bit and explore various different places and cultures and cuisines,
Right.
etc., in order to feel self-actualized, feel that okay, they have explored the territory and they have seen what comes with the territory, and now they are in the process of some creative knowledge output and things like that, basically.
Right. Right.
So this is also not possible with 30,000 USD per year. This is also not possible,
Hmm.
right? So firstly, we have to remark that the people for whom this particular behavior is puzzling to explain are very few in number. For vast majority of humanity, for the vast majority of humanity,
Hmm.
being active and ethically active is much more of a necessity rather
Hmm.
than a choice.
Makes sense, huh?
You can see even 90 to 95% of humanity falls in that domain. It is
Correct.
only the top 5 to 10% lucky few.
Hmm.
So, for instance, I'll give you a statistics. Even on OnlyFans, which is supposed to be a very dopaminergic website that is taking the world towards negativity, and on porn websites also,
Right.
only the top 5% creators are making a lot of money, basically.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And maximum would be the top 10%. So there is a Pareto there also. There is an exponential distribution there as well, basically.
Right.
And I'll introduce a term over here. This is called as ergodicity, basically. Ergodicity essentially means how quickly a system is dynamically changing. So,
Acha.
for example, ergodicity of water molecules that are boiling is very high because the molecule that is on top comes down, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
how quickly can a like sociological ergodicity would mean that how quickly a high status individual can potentially become lower status and vice versa, basically.
Okay. Okay. Hmm.
So, in dopaminergic disciplines, ergodicity is high in general for
Right.
companies also, for individuals also. Like the
Right.
person at the top, because there is no inherent competitive advantage, right?
Hmm.
There is no inherent competitive advantage in dopaminergic disciplines, basically,
Correct.
right? So
Correct.
those will be displaced very soon, and you can see this very closely as well. Like people who have lot of intrinsic value to add and are very difficult to displace and shift, they have
Hmm.
inherent competitive advantage for a lifetime.
Hmm.
This is also applicable for any company as well. In any company
Right.
structure or organization, also this is applicable. Like the junior level employees and staff whose skill sets are relatively lesser,
Hmm.
their positions have more ergodicity. So replaceability is more there basically.
Right. Right. Okay.
But
Right.
but people who are veterans of the industry and have acquired a lot of experience in that
Hmm.
particular field slash sector slash sector of the economy slash industry, it is very
Hmm.
difficult to replace or displace them basically.
Yeah.
So as to say.
Right.
So so experience, wealth, social status, fame, etc.
Hmm.
are some things that make your position in life more stable, and because of that more stable position in life you are
Hmm.
going to be relatively happier because you will eliminate what we can call as depressions, future depressions in your, or future, you can say, valleys in your ET graph or EMOT graph
Right.
basically.
Right. Right. Huh.
So in the future, there will be some valleys that will inevitably come, right? For example, like let's say, for example, a person who has kids. So in the future, there will be some school fees payments, there will be some tuition class payments, there will be some illness that will
Correct.
beget the kids necessarily. That happens basically. That is the nature of human life. Like more things can go wrong than can go right in general, basically.
Hmm.
So for 90 to 95% of people, the simple graph, simply the graph will answer the question basically. Okay. So the graph goes like this. If they are active, then they are actually making effort and getting now area under the curve for the entire lifetime. Think.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the lifetime can be very, like, just think about it. The effort that
Right.
they are making at one moment, this is the curve that they are getting gifted.
Right. Right.
And this is like this you can say can be one day's effort. This you can say this can be one
Hmm.
day's effort. One
Hmm.
day, let us say. But the benefit of one day's effort is going to be like lasting for a lifetime, right?
Right. Right.
Basically. Especially so if they are in the relatively lower stratas of society economically, socio-economically speaking.
Hmm. Okay. Right.
For them, one day's active effort that is impactful in their own lives, be it in terms of skill development, be it in terms of contributing to a company and hence developing social capital inside that company, be it in
Right.
terms of brand development and so on and so forth. That effort is going to last for a lifetime for
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
Now, as opposed to that, if they are involved in dopaminism, so what is the graph that they are going to get? The dopaminergic graph is
Doc-
going to be like this.
Correct.
And if they do it twice, let us say, okay, then the graph will be like this.
Correct.
And then if they do it thrice, then the graph will be like this, and then they will be kind of addicts, basically.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So what is preferable, basically? This small amount of effort and then kind of lifetime of achievement, basically. That is
Hmm.
preferred. See, you can think like this, na? See, every extra dollar that we are earning, basically. So let's assume that a person's expense is on a daily basis 1,000 rupees. Let's assume.
Right.
Okay. So let's say on a daily basis, if they are earning, let us say 3,000 rupees. So that 2,000 rupees is extra, right? So
Right.
every day that 2,000 rupees is going towards compounding their net assets, right?
Hmm.
Effectively. Even if they just invest in normal SIPs like mutual funds and things like that,
Right.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if they normally invest in some index funds as well, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because companies are assets that are governing the flux, the energy flux, right? That we earlier talked about, basically.
Right. Right.
The, yeah, the energy that is coming out of the earth and getting converted to entropy, a company structure is actually controlling that, right? Lot of that. And there are
Correct.
multiple agents who are invested in that company and want that company to succeed. So
Hmm.
investing in assets is literally like the most important way of earning even when you are not working.
Hmm. Okay.
And if let us say there is no earning when you are not working, that means that statement is valid that till the end of life you will have to be working only
Yep.
necessarily.
Yeah.
So either you should invest in assets that are owned by you, including your own brand and so on and so forth, or
Hmm.
you should be investing in assets that are in your portfolio. So developing the portfolio from early is like a very good thing in general, basically,
Right.
as far as the financial stability of a person is concerned, right?
Right. Right.
And since most people are never going to reach that 12 per month kind of level, basically,
Hmm.
in their entire lifetime, most people
Correct.
are not going to reach that. For most people, it goes without saying that, like paying the small amount of price and sacrificing dopaminism and gaining the lifetime of a small increment in the
Hmm.
curve, in the emoti curve, basically. Huh?
Right.
This,
Right.
this is going to be logically, mathematically. We can now mathematically justify that
Yeah.
this is mathematically giving them more utility.
Yeah.
The problem comes for people who are very lucky in the hereditary or the genetic or the intelligence, and
Right.
actually a combination of all, like socio-economically, genetically, and hereditary wise, wealth wise,
Right.
whoever are lucky, the so-called lucky people, right?
Hmm.
So
Correct.
problem actually comes when we try to explain it for them,
Hmm.
basically. Okay.
Hmm.
So I have got a few explanations basically. Yeah. So this is like yeah, this is what happens, that to social capital, net worth,
Correct.
etc. You sacrifice and then you earn basically, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I have also visualized the following as well, that this dopaminism that was sacrificed right here, this this is
Hmm.
actually not exactly a sacrifice, because with this effort you are gaining something. You are gaining the satisfaction in the moment,
Hmm.
satisfaction in that moment,
Right.
satisfaction of what?
Putting in the
Of
effort or the psychological
yes.
way.
Yes, but why are you putting in the effort? Because ultimately, one of the biggest struggles of any human being is to fight death of oneself, of
Right.
of psychologically, of
Right.
one
Huh.
loved ones, etc., including parents, siblings, spouse, and kids, etc., etc. Right?
Right.
So satisfaction in that moment of doing one's best, right? Of doing one's best
Hmm.
to fight, you can say, deprivation,
Hmm.
demise, death for oneself and loved ones, basically.
Right.
Because what is the aim of the gene? The aim of the gene is to procreate and replicate, basically.
Right. Right. Oh.
Aristotle used to talk about teleos, basically. So teleos means, like, for example, what is the aim of a seed? The aim of a seed is to flourish into a plant and later into a tree and like grow big. like shoot its roots down into the ground, go up with leaves and stems and branches and capture the sunlight and so on and so forth.
Correct.
So
Correct.
this is teleological, means towards some purpose basically, so as to say, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
So human beings also have a purpose, like genetically, biologically, they have a purpose. Of course, sociologically and culturally, they will select various different things. Like somebody will be a shopkeeper, somebody will be a video editor, somebody will be a physics professor, somebody will be a businessman, so on and so forth, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somebody will be an actor, somebody will be a cricketer, somebody will be an office employee, so on and so forth, right? But genetically, what is the purpose? To procreate.
Right.
And you will associate with this one statement that procreation can happen only when safety security is there. So the primary focus is survival, because without survival, how can there be replication?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So survival is 101, you can say,
Correct. Correct.
or even zero, like that. That is the fundamental level, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
most fundamental level is survival. And
Correct.
after survival, then there is replication or procreation, basically.
Yeah.
So those are the aims of a human being, you can say,
Yeah.
right? So that is the teleos, the biological teleos with which we are sent on Earth, basically.
Right. So
So
even yeah.
yeah, yeah, please comment. Yeah,
Yeah, so what you're saying is that even when we say that we're making a sacrifice, but even that there is that win, psychological win, that we're giving it our best. So it's like a
correct, correct,
no-brainer
correct,
almost, huh? Like even that graph is like
correct,
not
correct,
as much
correct.
we are sacrificing as we think we are.
Yeah, we are not sacrificing as much as we think we are, basically. But
Hmm.
this has to be understood on a very visceral level,
Okay. Hmm.
on a very deep level, not on a subliminal, not on a shallow level, basically. It has to be
Hmm.
understood on a very deep level. If this
Hmm.
is understood on a very deep level, then it is easy psychologically to make that sacrifice,
Right.
especially for hyperlogical people.
Right. Hmm.
See, our work over here and whatever we are documenting is
Hmm.
also a foundation of the rational basis of, you can say, humanism is going to be the next religion, right? Because the current religions are, especially Gen Z, most of Gen Z is atheist. Most of Gen Z
Right.
folks are atheist, basically,
Correct.
because what has happened is the religious myths have been debunked, basically.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So now, what one of the outcomes of this exercise that we are embarking upon is to take the utility out of the religious books and concepts and try
Hmm.
to encapsulate that into a framework of thinking and rationalizing or logical thinking, which
Right.
also involves the goodness and the good elements, basically, from there,
Yeah.
and to do away with the dogma. And
Hmm.
see, there are many YouTube debates about whether God exists or not, etc., so on and so forth. Like, I will document my thoughts in one of the subsequent podcasts. That will also be interesting. But right now, what we are trying to do is we are not going to go into those debates, basically, because if we think about like this, like, is religion correct or wrong, is religion like, does God exist or not, and so on and so forth. So dogmatic or dogma oriented, just because some prophet or somebody wrote something down, why should we listen to? Gen Z folks are not listening to their parents, so why will they listen to some random book that they know nothing about, etc.? So
Right.
this is the internet generation that was bombarded with lot of information. And the way in which sociological reality spreads among the masses is that if people that Gen Z folks respect, if they are not respecting religion, then as a proxy, the next person is also not going to respect religion. And
Hmm.
because of the atheist movement, like, we can take a poll and see that today 25 to 30% people in the world are atheists, and which was less than 1% maybe 500-600 years ago, basically.
Right. Right. Huh.
And this is unidirectional, basically. Like, it does not so happen that earlier there was a religious answer to a particular phenomena, like why do rains or storms happen, and now there is a scientific answer. And
Hmm.
this is a unidirectional movement, basically. It does not so happen that earlier there was a scientific best answer for a phenomena, but now the best method of thinking is religious. This
Hmm.
never happened.
Correct.
Like, dogma or religion or superstition or myth is not going to prevail simply because it is not scientific.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to shout or debate anybody when you are trying to say 2 plus 2 is 4.
Hmm.
But if you are trying to say 2 plus 2 is 11 or something like that, ridiculous like that, then you have to shout and debate people. Then you have to like step over toes, etc. And then you will still only win that particular argument, but lose the entire consignment of sociological reality that you are trying to portray or create, basically.
Right.
Of course, there will be fluctuations and there's always going to be time taken to reach equilibrium state. So currently we are in the baby boomer generation and like we are with Gen X also, Gen Y, Gen Z, everybody is there basically. So because of that, what happens is there will be some superstitious beliefs from the past that will
Right.
still be there in the masses and so on and so forth. So when
Right.
the sorry to be crass and crude over here, but when the
Hmm.
generations pass out, basically, so as to say,
Correct. Huh. Huh.
it anyway happens only, and when Gen Z and for the subsequent generations, when they come into power,
Hmm.
so all the dogmatic notions and beliefs will be kind of gotten rid of, basically, more
Right.
so.
Right. Yeah.
That is nature's way of giving the opportunity to the latest form of life, basically.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So here, coming back to the point, we are not exactly sacrificing.
Hmm.
We are gaining the satisfaction in that particular moment. You remember there are days wherein which we really worked a lot and then we slept very peacefully at night, basically.
Hmm. Correct.
Feeling
Yeah.
very satisfied that we have really worked a lot, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are we working towards? We are working towards our goal of outlasting death, which is not possible. But
Hmm.
then,
Hmm.
what do we say when we say we are trying to outlast death? Like we create art, we create poetry, we create
Right.
some structures, we create companies, for example, we
Right.
create children, we create
Right.
sociological bonding, we create books. We some people create monuments and memorials, and some people put their name on halls or various different constructions and architecture and so on and so forth, basically.
Right.
Some
Yeah.
people try to label streets after them, some people try to label scientific laws after them, so on and so forth. So that is the validation seeking behavior or the death defying attempt. We attempt
Hmm.
to defy death, basically.
Right. Right.
Every human being does this, every human being fails at it, but they still want to try and fail rather than to not even try.
Hmm. Hmm.
That is their aim. That is the aim of humans, basically.
Right. Right. And we will talk about this in more detail also, right? I presume
Yeah, yeah,
because
of
this
course,
is
of course. Yeah.
a very fundamental thing for all of us, right? I mean, how like
Yeah, yeah.
the whole
For
point of
everybody.
wanting to.
For
Hmm. Yeah.
everybody, yes, yes. So there was one saying, I don't remember who said it. A man lives two lives. One he has not realized, like one till when he has not realized that he is going to die, and one after which he realizes how short
Huh.
life is and that he is going to
Yeah,
die.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
there
I
is
think
something
something
like
like
that.
the second one begins when he realizes he has only one.
Yeah,
Something like
one
that,
a
right?
man has two lives. The second life begins when he realizes that he has only
He has
one,
only one.
basically.
Huh.
Something, yeah, something like that. Yeah. So basically, my point over here is this: that here we are actually not losing anything.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So we might think that we are making effort and hence losing something, but
Right.
because of that effort, see, this effort gets compensated by this curve, this entire lifelong benefit.
Right. Right.
So this is the two marshmallow behavior: patience and
Right.
like thinking long term and things like that. And then this dopaminism that you lost is compensated by the satisfaction in the moment
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
that you are trying to defy death.
Hmm.
So as
Hmm.
to say,
Right.
because why are you earning so much money? Like if you just go deep into the fundamentals of it, one answer will be positive: the seek or search for happiness slash eudaimonia. Why are you working so hard, or why are you doing anything for that matter? Okay.
Hmm.
And one very important component of defying death or seeking eudaimonia is the like defying of death or trying to get ahead of death or prolong your life and so on and so forth. Now,
Right.
people who are 50, 60, 70 years old, there is a trend right now of anti-aging probiotics and all these supplementation and
Hmm.
like devices and all. Like this can even be a very good business or investment opportunity, basically,
Actually.
while the petroleum lasts, matlab, create centers
Right.
that are anti-aging based and things like that, basically.
Right. Right.
So invest in machinery that is related to anti-aging and things like that. So obviously in any segmentation there are myths and there is like some kernel of truth, basically. So here also, like for example, astronomy and astrology, basically. So some people still believe in astrology. That happens.
Right.
So Here also there will be some anti-aging myths that people will purport, and that happens in sociological reality because of the general entropic nature of human sociology. So
Hmm.
with the advent of the information age, it was so predicated that okay, information will be great, right? And
Yeah.
information revolution will happen. But as you can see, 90-95% is misinformation only.
Yes,
People are
yes,
trying to
correct. Yeah,
convince each other like of whatever they want their version of truth to be, rather than
correct, correct,
actually trying to together come and arrive at a truth or a kernel of
correct,
truth.
correct, correct.
Yeah. So answering this question as to why an active and ethically active life, okay,
Hmm.
is more appropriate. So
Hmm.
this graph gives the clear cut answer basically. For most people, 90 to 95% of people, we'll now later talk about the super lucky, privileged, etc., who
Right,
don't really have to do anything as well.
right,
And
right.
I may or may not have a perfect answer in that particular
Hmm.
scenario, but I will give the best possible answer that I have at this
Right,
point in time, basically.
right.
So for most people, being active and ethically active makes more sense. And
Okay.
even for those lucky people, right? If
Hmm.
they are not ethical, then eventually speaking, what will happen is they will end up suffering more if they are not ethical. Think about it. Because if let's say they are not ethical and they are lazy and things like that, basically, right?
Hmm.
And they are just used to people gifting them or things being so easy for them, then they are not going to make this effort, this active effort. Generally
Right,
speaking, that's
right,
see expending. See why is sloth a sin? Because expending least amount of energy is what is most natural
right.
for a human being.
Correct,
So
correct.
most natural is to be in this like a passive mode, basically, that
Right,
kind of a thing. And
right.
hedonism leads to dopa addiction. That's why hedonism is bad, because in the utility, you are going to minimize utility. Utility,
Correct.
lifetime utility can be defined as the area under the emoti graph, basically.
Emoticon. Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah.
basically, you have to be as less negative as possible, as positive as possible, and at least as less negative as possible, basically, in
Right.
general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these things are bad. This is quite
Hmm.
clear.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
clear. Yeah. Yeah.
This is clear.
Yeah.
Moderate is going to keep you mediocre in general.
Hmm.
And active and ethically active is going to make you rise and rise and rise, maybe slowly. Maybe a person who is ethically trying to build a company as ethically as possible, trying to build a company, not creating any like hazards in the sociological commons, basically. Yeah. Maybe they will have slightly less competitive advantage compared to people who are doing it dopaminergically. But since there is heavy amount of ergodicity in the dopaminergic department,
Right.
because of that, in the long run, the ethical guy is going to win.
Correct. Yeah.
Because the ethical guy is slowly trying to do the good for himself as well as the world.
Yeah.
And you can say the dopaminergic people are trying to do bad for the world in order to gain term short short term fame, short term money, short term wealth, these kind of things, basically.
Right.
So
Right.
they don't mind harming others, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
They don't mind harming others, and since they don't mind harming others, they'll do anything to get short term pleasure or short term. They are basically short term focused, you can say.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
what does happen when this happens is, in the short term they will gain whatever they want to gain or have to gain, basically.
Right.
But because of this attitude,
Hmm.
they will get a habit of being short term focused,
Okay. Right.
and their neurology and minds will train themselves to be short term focused because they won in
Hmm.
the short run, basically.
Correct.
So
Correct.
they will try to do the short term easy thing rather than the long term right thing, basically. So
Right.
again, the
Right.
example is one marshmallow versus two marshmallow, basically.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
So they will, so that means their impulsiveness was rewarded.
Hmm. Hmm.
That means they will depend upon their impulsiveness for the reward.
Hmm. Yeah.
So neuropsychologically speaking, they are themselves trapping themselves in dopaminism, so as to say.
Right. Right.
And they are on this particular curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people who are very rich, like for example, some rappers or some corn stars or something like that,
Hmm.
but they have not earned their money ethically.
Hmm.
They are internally very shallow and very hollow. They don't have what we can call as deep rooted self esteem.
Right.
And this deep rooted self esteem is not there because internally they have known always that they have done bad for this humanity.
Hmm.
That's why their egos are very fragile, generally
Right.
speaking, and
Right.
they try to move away and away from the truth. So they can never be truth seekers, less spiritual seekers. So they can only be escapists, you can say.
Hmm.
So a
Yeah.
typical example is people who wanted to get rich because of the crypto scams.
Right.
So all these crypto scams have worked because dopaminergic people follow dopaminergic content creators. The content creators created a fake cryptocurrency because anybody can create a cryptocurrency and said that okay, this fake cryptocurrency has value. Okay,
Right.
and then you could buy it, and then people bought it, and suddenly it was dumped. So
Right.
whoever were the last buyers suffered, or whoever were the holders and holders of that cryptocurrency suffered,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So it's like that. Let
Hmm.
us say by mistake somebody had succeeded. Some Bitcoin people succeeded also, basically, right? People who had bought into Bitcoin earlier, they succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then they would try to buy another cryptocurrency. Maybe they'll succeed in the second one also.
Hmm.
But eventually, because they have developed this habit, it will
Hmm.
be very difficult for them to quit it. And 99.99% of such people will fail. That's why gamblers usually fail and the house usually wins. Because even
Correct.
if
Yeah.
in the short run, if they are lucky and they won in the short run, in the
Right.
long run, they are going to fail.
Correct. Correct.
Now, the issue happens when long run and short run is not defined or not well defined, or there is so much technological revolution and change that the short run itself spans across 30, 40 years, basically. That is when the issue happens.
Okay. Right.
Are you getting it? Like, for example, so look at this. There was an era of Harry Potter and books like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and so on and so forth, right? So
Hmm.
after that, after the internet era, think about it. There is no famous novel or book that is as famous as Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, basically. After the internet era,
Hmm. Correct. Yeah.
and correlate it with this factor that there is no very famous movie star also. All the extreme superstars are from the
Right.
pre-internet era. When
Hmm.
we really had mobile phones, like from in the past 10 years, from 2012, 13, after that there is no particular mega star, if you can think about it.
Okay, because they don't last that long, huh? The
Yeah,
cycle of
because the attention economy got obfuscated, right? It got spread out, basically.
right.
So yeah, so the Pareto of stardom or
Hmm.
status, you can say, got dissipated. It
Right.
became,
Right.
yeah, the variance increased, basically. So as to say that there was more concentration at the start.
Right.
So it was more difficult for a newcomer to crack that social status position. So for example, Kardashians are famous before 2012 or 13. See, 2012, 13, 14 is a special era in the current alive generation's lifetime, because that is when cell phones became ubiquitous or
Hmm.
generally available, generally
Right.
speaking.
Right.
Before that, also, not everybody had touchscreen cell phones and things like that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And of late, they become more and more generalized and more ubiquitous, cell phones. But
Right.
before 2013, 14, 15, even everybody did not have cell phones.
Hmm. Hmm. Or at least not the
So
smartphones with the proper
at
screen.
least not the smartphones. And
Smartphone.
even before 2005, 6, 7, very few people even had phones, you can
Correct.
say.
Yeah.
Like people used to use pagers and like
Hmm.
landline dial-up connection
Yeah.
phones and things like that earlier.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Hmm. So that's the entire scenario. So
Hmm.
after this era, you can see that there are no superstars. There are not too many mega super duper hit movies are also not there. There are some one odd movies with extremely high marketing budgets and special
Hmm.
effects, wherein with like those movies are just shoved into the face of the public, basically. For example, like Pathan or things like that.
Right.
So,
Right.
but apart from that, like there are no organic super hits, you can say.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Similarly, okay, even in the case of movies, there might be, because there is like it is a dopaminergic phenomena, basically. Like for example, the Marvel franchise is a super hit
Right.
because people don't want to lose that social status of not having watched the Marvel movie, basically.
Right. Right.
It's like
And they have a marketing budget also. I mean, it's an entire
also, and they
franchise.
have a huge marketing budget also.
Right.
But
Right.
apparently, despite of having a huge budget, the latest Avatar did not create a lot of profit, like
Right. Right.
compared to
Okay.
the manufacturing price, compared to the cost price. But anyway, coming back to the point, look at this trend. that earlier whoever were the superstars are from the earlier era.
Right.
You can take any film industry, or you can even take books also for that matter, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this happens because of the democratization of content creation, you can say. And because of Netflix, Prime, and the OTT platforms, super duper hit movies are also very less in number, you can say.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the point being that people who are lucky are from that. And what I have seen is always luck is very closely associated with first move, first come, first serve, or first mover advantage, basically.
Right.
Very close. I have seen this across industries, and like there is a very, very close association with first come, first serve, or first mover advantage. Like
Acha.
Warren Buffett was lucky because he started very early. Warren Buffett was also lucky because USA got lucky in world wars, basically, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Correct. Yeah.
So yeah, means the people who are lucky right now, like Shah Rukh Khan, etc. Like currently, the actor in Mumbai who has to struggle a lot has to
Mm.
struggle 100x or 200x more, or even 1000x
Mm.
more compared to what Shah Rukh Khan may have had to struggle at that point in time, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So this first mover advantage is a very, very great advantage, basically.
Right. Right.
And sociological reality, I showed you the graph. Like basically, when sociological state changes, now if
Right.
Shah Rukh Khan has become a brand from that point in time, now it is very difficult for him to become not a brand, basically.
Mm.
So even if he does shady things like promote Byju's, etc., which
Right.
is kind of a fraudulent company, that kind of a thing. Even if he does these kind of things, basically, then also it is very difficult for him to kind of lose his social status, you can say,
Mm.
or social
Mm.
stature in general,
Right.
because the sociological reality has been set in that he has some amount of social status in this today's world. We
Yeah.
will talk more in detail about status also. Like in fact, I am writing a book about like the paradox of status as well, basically. So
Acha.
status is kind of like a proxy, basically, you can say. It's a
Mm.
proxy to human beings having less amount of thinking space in their brains.
Okay.
That is what a status is proxy to, because
Right.
human beings can't think that much, na. That's why that's
Mhm.
why that's why that's why they use the status proxy.
Right. So if others are treating them with high status, that means I don't have to think he must have something.
Correct.
That's right.
And same thing happens with pre-selection also, right? During
Right.
sexual
Correct.
mate selection, basically.
Yes. Yes. And
So
marketing also social proof and.
and marketing, social proof also. So all these things are correlated. Many things are correlated actually in this
Hmm.
manner.
Right.
So So the doubt or the question mark comes. So here we have theoretically proven that this ethically active state is going to bring highest amount of utility for a lifetime,
Right.
basically. Okay.
Right.
Again, I am repeating, active doesn't mean active at 100% of waking hours, basically.
Yeah.
Like mostly active means 60, 70, 80, 90% active, basically. So as to
Yeah.
say. One point in time, I was talking with you, like when we met in Mumbai, as to I am
Mm.
confused whether I should work 13 hours or 16 hours in a day, actively,
Right.
basically, something
Right.
like that. But then, like, I have a solution to that also now. I have a proper mental model of thinking. It's much better to compute in terms of biological time rather than in normal time. If you are at a certain level, basically, in life, and
Mm.
if you have some kind of automation going, some kind of, you
Right.
can say, leverage and capital going under you, it is much better to compute in terms of effectiveness rather than in terms of like linear in time. So I'll come to those models of personal productivity and efficacy also. We are going
Right.
to talk about personal productivity. I have my notes ready for the same, but I'm
Okay.
trying to kind of finish this up basically right now.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. So now what would you say to a person who is lucky? Let us say, for example, anybody, like a person who is lucky in general, like people who come into Bollywood because of nepotism, or let's say a rich businessman's kid who doesn't want to now work, basically.
Right. Right.
So how would you potentially tell them that working in the working in this active and ethically active methodology is the best way?
Hmm.
How would you potentially tell them, or how would you rationalize this with them, basically?
So I
Because
think.
what they would say is that what they would say, no, I am cool, I am perfectly fine. So one way of doing it is, I'll just mention my comments and then you
Right.
can contribute. Yeah. So one way of doing is, and this is definitely true, it is the method of opportunity costs. Okay. So,
Okay.
for example, Vijay Mallya was lucky because he was given a lot of wealth in a hereditary manner. Same,
Right.
same with Dan Bilzerian, same with Vijay Mallya's kid, for example.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think Siddharth Mallya, etc. Right?
Uh.
So, same with Bill Gates' kids, basically, for example,
Right.
or Warren Buffett's kids. So they are lucky. Okay, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are just going to give some $10 million, but $10 million is also very great head start, right? Basically,
Yeah.
compared to the average of humanity. So
Hmm.
people who are born into wealth, they could have done so much more. That's my claim over here, basically.
Hmm.
Or people who are genetically extremely gifted, if they were in the active and ethically active state of affairs,
Hmm.
then they could have done so much more for themselves as well as the world.
Right.
And compared to what they keep doing, which is just chilling, and even after chilling, they are just going to hit the hedonic set point again and again, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's not like they are just chilling, and every day going on vacations and eating delicious food and gourmet meals and things like that. So because of that, their life is so heavenly. It's not like that, right? Because their
Hmm.
diminishing marginal utility is also going to hit.
Yep. Yep.
Then they'll say that I'll move on to something else, basically, like something else, pick up some other hobby. So that's why rich people keep playing golf and things like that, and go to this bets, or horse bets and rider
Mhm.
bets and things like that. What I'm saying is, if they are ethically active,
Right.
okay, then they could have, okay, let's think about this. Solving global problems, is this going to be more rewarding, or winning a horse race wherein which you bet on the jockey or the horse as a very rich person, or going to Vegas and winning or losing something in a poker hand or a casino or something like that, or
Right.
living a dopaminergic hedonistic lifestyle. Okay, for 1 month it might be fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
but then don't we think that there is a purpose and meaning of life that is extremely lacking, basically? So don't we think that they are kind of abusers of the luck that they are into? Yeah.
Yep.
And there is a book, the book's name is The Myth of Meritocracy.
Okay.
I'll in fact Google it right now.
Huh.
The Myth of Meritocracy, yes.
Myth of.
The Myth of Meritocracy, why working class kids still
Yeah.
get working class jobs.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's by James Bloodworth,
Hmm.
and there are similar, there are similar such books, basically.
Books, right? Huh.
So
Even I'm checking it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
the myth of meritocracy, and that there is this Harvard University professor.
Hmm.
His name is Michael Sandel. I think he has also written something, and
Okay.
the tyranny of merit. His book's name is The Tyranny of Merit.
Right.
Michael Sandel. He is a Harvard ethics professor.
Acha. Okay.
So one of the findings is this, that success is very closely correlated with socio-economic status when the kid was growing up, and that is quite obvious, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like people who succeed across social status boundaries are very few, very extremely few.
Right.
And those were also lucky. Like, for example, basketball stars who are very tall
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and ended up playing basketball from the start. So there are very few people, like
Hmm.
some rapper, some sports people, etc. And in
Hmm.
business, almost there is almost no chance to succeed without extreme amount of effort. Basically, you can say.
Right. Right.
So the tyranny of meritocracy and the myth of meritocracy, basically, like the meritocracy myth, basically.
Right.
What does this tell us? That people think that they have worked hard and achieved something. That
Hmm.
means they deserve it.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
That is what most people think.
Think
But
correct.
But the reality might be that a person might have had to work hard and spend X amount of efforts to achieve that thing, but
Right.
somebody else might have had to spend 100X amount of efforts.
Right.
And
Right.
somebody else might have had to spend 1000X amount of efforts.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for example, all these nepotism based kids who come into the movie industry and things like that, they
Right.
feel that okay, they have also learned to dance and they have also attended
Correct.
some acting class or some acting school, etc. So, because
Correct.
of that, they deserve whatever social status, fame, recognition that they are getting.
Yeah.
But they discount for the fact that what about others who don't have these privileges?
Correct.
So, uh, nobody is saying that you have come here with zero effort. Ultimately,
Hmm.
it takes
Correct.
certain amount of energy to be expounded necessarily so in
Yeah.
order to achieve something, right?
Yeah.
including, let us say, a shot, even though it has many takes and retakes, etc.
Yeah.
But that effort could be X or 100X or 1000X or million X also, na, in some cases, basically.
Mhm.
So let's look here. I'm drawing something. This is wealth
Right.
slash money. This is a new graph. No, it's not the HDHO graph. And
Okay.
this is, let us say, bio incentives. So what I am saying here is
Hmm.
any act is psychologically, consciously and subconsciously undertaken by any particular individual in a
Right.
combination of monetary incentives and biological incentives.
Okay.
So, for example, if the biological incentives are high enough,
Hmm.
then monetarily, even if zero wealth is there, then
Right.
also then also they will take on that thing.
Right.
So,
Right.
for example, let's look at the phenomena of spread of reputation. Let's say if there is a good brand, okay, there is
Right.
a good D2C brand, let us say, directly marketing to the consumers, and if that brand is good enough,
Hmm.
then with zero added cost, people suggest that brand to others,
Correct.
so that they can gain the biological kudos points.
Correct. Yeah.
See, human beings are very like one model in which human beings 99.99999% of the times always fit is the self-centeredness model, basically.
Hmm.
So they are not recommending your brand to somebody else
For
because
your
they
people.
want to do,
Uh,
yeah, it's like they are gaining kudos points from your brand as well as gaining kudos points from that particular person. So that's why they are getting biological incentives. Even though wealth they are getting zero, they are getting biological incentives, basically.
right.
So the movie industry already gives fame and social status, which are heavy biological incentives, right?
Hmm.
So what does this imply? Even if wealth is less, but biological incentives are only so high
Yeah.
that the person will try to accomplish that task or do that task. But
Right.
now you add on top of that wealth also. Think. So not
Hmm.
only fame, reputation, etc., like mate selection, so on and so forth, right?
Right.
Validation in case of females, right? So
Right.
on these are all biological incentives. So on top of that, you add wealth also. That means the incentive structure is very high, na, for succeeding.
Yep.
So making more sacrifices in the face of much higher incentive structure is not that great of a deal, basically,
Hmm.
compared to making sacrifices when the incentive structure is very low or
Right.
nil or
Right.
non-existent, for example. So, for instance, people in deprivation who don't have jobs also take up jobs which are negatively oriented in biological incentives for small amount of wealth.
Right. Right. Correct.
So they even take up these kind of jobs, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So bio incentives and wealth is like the correct way of thinking about why somebody is doing something,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So people may also sink wealth, basically, in order to gain more biological incentives. So for example, people may sink wealth in order to spend time with family and friends.
Correct. Yeah.
So, so they may be like sinking wealth in order to gain this biological experience of spending time with family and friends and so on
Right.
and so forth.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
So this is the idea. And if wealth is also going and biologically also it's getting like incentives are less, basically, then in that particular case, people kind of give up and then tend towards euthanasia and those kind of things. Like in
Right.
hospital, let's say for
Hmm.
example, on the deathbed, etc. When only like or cancer patients and things like that. If it's only going to cause suffering all around, basically,
Right. Yeah.
then they choose to reduce the suffering. So even by
Right.
reducing the suffering, they are still following the maximizing utility principle, because if
Right.
you are negative, if you are necessarily compulsorily negative, and if you have
Correct.
got nothing to live for,
Hmm.
then maximizing utility will imply reducing the negative time, basically, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because now if your area under the curve has gone negative, so as to say.
Correct. Correct.
So we are particularly talking about the lucky people who
Hmm.
are abusing their luck.
Right.
And this brings us to a very interesting question, basically, because all of us are lucky to certain extents, right? Basically. So
Yeah.
on a continuum, if we talk about what we are supposed to do, so this is one of that ethical theory, right? So what
Right.
we are supposed to do, I told you that if we are going to be active and ethically active, 90% of effort is going to go in just resolving the fighting, or you can say the
Yeah.
split of humanity and the microstructures, the micro communes that humanity gets already distributed and divided in, basically, right?
Yeah.
So 90% of effort is going to go towards fighting and competing with those communes only,
Yes. Yeah.
and remaining 10% has to be equi split as 5% for
Mm.
yourself and 5% for the world, basically. So
Right.
that is like one ethical structure, or being on the maximally moral lane that I talked about, basically.
Right. Yeah.
But now here we are talking about those lucky quote unquote bastards, so as to say, speaking from the position of humanity, let us say,
Right. Right.
speaking in favor of humanity. So those basically people who are going to cheat, basically, and not feel morally guilty about it.
Hmm.
So they are going to commit the sins and affect sociological reality, because see, if one person is committing a sin, then that means others are more inclined towards committing sins. Think about it. Okay. Let's
Okay.
say, let's say a person robs a bank, or
Hmm.
let's say a group of criminals rob a bank. Now, what will the people who are actually who had kept their money in the bank, what will they think? The world
Hmm.
is so unfair. I
Correct.
should also like rob my boss.
Right.
So
Right.
even if they are not committing actual robbery in their workplace, they might be doing things like quiet quitting or
Hmm.
dishonestly reporting their labor and things like that, basically,
Right. Right.
or something like that. So maybe they could have achieved the same amount of work in 2 hours, but they reported 8 hours or 10 hours, basically, for the
Right.
same amount of work,
Right.
which is very routine. So they will think that this is the transitive effect or the butterfly effect, because of which because of the bank getting robbed, so they lost their life savings.
Hmm.
Let's assume that they had kept it in the bank. So now they want to dissipate the pain, you can say.
Hmm.
They want to socialize the pain or dissipate the pain.
Right.
So what ends up happening here is that committing a sin leads others to commit sins.
Right.
So that's why these movements like my body, my rules, and my life, my rules, etc., are wrong sociologically.
Hmm.
Because as human beings, you are not living in isolated reality.
Right.
What a human being does affects other
Hmm.
human beings. And
Correct.
that's why
Right.
I was very affected when I was buying books and studying for my IIT JEE exam, and I cracked it with very good marks. So I was affected because I was feeling guilty, because since I had purchased the books, then
Right.
somebody somewhere did not get the chance to purchase the books, basically.
Right. Right.
Since I occupied that seat of IIT, then somebody somewhere could not occupy the seat of IIT, and this would
Hmm.
have been still fine if the competition was extremely equal. So there was a level playing field, basically.
Right.
The
Right.
some people did not have books and some people had books. So
Right.
obviously, having books to study from, textbooks to study from, is going to be a huge marginal advantage on somebody
Yeah.
who does not have books, right?
Correct.
Obviously, that's
Correct.
like
Yeah.
but obvious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So somebody who does not have books literally has to invent all the theory on their own,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Think, think about. So
Yeah.
that is such a drastic disadvantage compared to like somebody who already has the books, basically, right?
Right. Yeah.
In the same amount of time. That's why this made me feel guilty, and because of that, like it started a chain of events in my
Uh,
mind about thinking
Right.
about what's the correct way to good live a good moral life, basically. And that's
Right.
that's from where all these models and ethical models, etc., have stemmed. Because I am also a physicist and hence mathematically oriented in thinking. So
Hmm.
if we can't pin down things on a mathematical level, then it's just arbitrary, like it's in the air, right? Basically, anybody
Correct.
can say anything, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
So, what do we say to those immoral people who want to abuse? So, one thing that we are postulating over here is they are losing with respect to opportunity cost.
Hmm.
Because no matter how much they enjoy, they are going to come back to the hedonic set point, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
And they could have done so much more for the world had they been ethically active. They chose to become hedonic addicts, basically, you can say dopa addicts, hedonic addicts,
Hmm.
or hedonic moderate or mediocre people, basically. Generally this is
Right.
what they do, right?
Right.
moderate hedonic moderate people who make x amount of effort, and like I told you about effort also, it's on this axis, right? So somebody who has extremely high biological incentives as well as monetary incentives, if they make x amount of effort, and somebody who has got negative biological incentives and very little wealth incentives, let us say, if they make
Right.
x amount of effort, this x is more like 100x, and this x is more like just x or even 0.1x.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the concept of auto effort or flow that we'll later get into, basically.
Okay.
Auto effort slash flow.
Right.
So if your biological incentives are very high, like somebody tells you, Sham, tomorrow you do XYZ things, you have to
Hmm.
completely, fully be dedicated for 4 hours and you will get $4 million for the same. So now you will do like you
Yeah,
will do
correct.
what,
Yeah.
like ethically speaking, you will put as much time and energy and effort as required in order to secure those $4 million, right? Basically.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
So that means you will be in a state of what can be called as auto effort, basically, right?
Yeah.
Auto effort or flow,
Hmm.
basically, right? So
Yeah.
this is also because of which people like Warren Buffett, when they say that choose a career that you will like, okay, that is kind of not exactly fully accurate. Not exactly only Warren Buffett, others as well, many
Hmm.
people. So
Hmm.
choose a career that you will enjoy a lot, something like
Hmm.
that, right?
Right.
Choose a career wherein which you will really like to do that particular thing a lot. That is not exactly perfectly accurate, because given sufficient amount of wealth,
Yeah.
you are going to be on that rectangular hyperbola or beyond, wherein which that thing will suddenly become likable to you.
Right. Right.
Like for example, I don't enjoy cooking a lot. I cook only once in a while, basically.
Right.
For me, cooking is quite tedious. But suddenly, if somebody says that, okay, Zenir, cook and you will get certain X amount of like wealth related incentives, then maybe
Right.
I'll start enjoying cooking also.
Hmm. Correct. Correct.
So it's up. So basically, effort is related to bio as well as wealth incentives. This people
Hmm.
forget. And this is a
Hmm.
rectangular hyperbola. So people
Acha.
usually see whether they are above this rectangular hyperbola or not.
Okay.
Psychologically speaking, a person is always making the subconscious calculation of
Hmm.
whether this particular endeavor is worth it or not,
Hmm.
based upon neuropsychologically where are they with respect to that particular rectangular hyperbola.
Yeah.
Means if let us say wealth incentives are less, bio incentives may should be pretty high.
Yeah.
If bio are less, wealth should be pretty high.
That's it. Correct.
Got it? So people will accept in this region with respect to whatever different incentives are there in their life, or
Right.
whatever different endeavors are there in their life. For
Right.
example, the legendary fictional character Sherlock Holmes did not used to charge a lot of wealth for his services,
Hmm.
because solving puzzles was his biological incentive, basically.
Correct.
And,
Correct.
and a fictional character called as Dr. Gregory House from
Hmm.
House MD TV series that has been modeled after Sherlock Holmes, kind of a
Acha.
thing.
Acha. Okay.
That person also is not very biological, sorry, very wealth oriented. They don't care about
Hmm.
earning a lot of wealth or something like that, or opportunity cost associated with earning a lot of wealth.
Right.
In business also, or in or normal freelancing also, this happens. So how much, like this curve is very important. This is the rectangular hyperbola kind of a curve, basically, which
Right.
essentially says that, okay, if bio incentives are low, then wealth incentives have to be higher. So people have to be coerced to do those things, basically, right? And if
Hmm.
bio
Right.
incentives are high, then wealth incentives can be low. Like for example, there
Right.
are some actors who are willing to work for free also,
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
because their status signaling based incentives are higher, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
There are some photographers who just DM girls and slide into the DMs of girls, and they want to like go in there and click photos and things like that, because they
Hmm.
will get that particular whatever X amount of minutes of company, right? With
Correct.
respect to that particular girl. So their
Correct.
bio incentives are higher, even though wealth incentives are not there. See,
Correct. Yeah.
and this graph may even be like this. For example, if bio incentives are higher, then wealth people are like willing to spend wealth also. So this graph may
Hmm.
not only be in the first quadrant,
In that
basically.
quadrant. Correct. Correct. Huh. Yeah. True. You could
It
sync
can be
wealth
like,
also.
yeah.
Huh.
So basically, people may want to sink wealth also with
Yeah.
respect to the biological incentives. In fact, people do that. Like they sink marginal wealth for the sake of biological incentive. In
Yeah.
fact, we all do that. Like we sink wealth for eating food, na, for
Correct.
example.
Correct. Huh. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That is necessary only, right?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
even
So
stay at
when
home
we come
parents.
back, Yeah. We will even come back to this graph, even like with further detail, basically, because this graph has a lot of wisdom nuggets kind of a thing. But
Hmm.
the point is this now, that they are losing, like the lucky immoral people, they are
Hmm.
losing out on opportunity costs.
Right.
This is something that they are definitely losing out on.
Hmm.
But the next question that comes, so till here it's perfectly answerable. Like for example, if somebody, like for example, Dan Blizzarian, he's a trust fund kid.
Right.
He was just given trust fund money and he blew that money basically.
Right.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. Instead, with those 30 or 40 million dollars, he could have potentially created a great business and made those 30 or 40 million dollars into probably $4 billion. And
Hmm.
like, what is the logic that we have? We should spend not more than 5% of our net profit, right? So, like, let's say if the business is worth $4 billion, which is like $4,000 million basically. Let's
Right.
say even if it's making a profit of, let's say, $200 million, the 5% of which is only $10 million, basically, like that.
Right.
And
Right.
he
Okay.
spent something 30 or 40 million dollars he spent in 10 years. So
Right.
yearly he was spending $3 million only. So if he had converted that into a business which requires patience and time,
Right.
then he could have potentially spent even more, even with the less than 5% principal, basically. Okay.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
look at this fact. Okay, now I'll psychologically explain, like this is like a very important thing over here. I think I need to explain this now.
Okay.
Just a second. Let me
Ah.
get oriented, because this is really, really, really important. Basically, let's look at the following now.
Hmm.
Let's take any unit of time. Let's take 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week or 1 month, etc. One
Okay.
year, something like that. Okay. So in 1 unit of time, how can one single person maximize their utility? In 1 unit of time, how
Hmm.
can a person maximize their utility? I'll speak basically like what I'll document my thoughts over here. Okay. So we can't work for 100% of the waking hours basically. Okay.
Right.
There has to be some amount of rest period compulsorily, otherwise the neurons get fatigued out basically.
Hmm.
So humans work like lions, na, like in bouts, you can say, in bouts. And a typical example of this would be, let's say, boxing bouts. There are bouts while boxing, right? So they box for certain, let's say, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and there is a break for 30 seconds or 1 minute or something like that basically,
Okay.
right?
Right. Correct.
Then will come the next bout, and this also correlates when we talk about high intensity interval training and things like that basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So imagine a person who is sprinting only all the time basically.
Ah.
All the time sprinting is not possible, na?
Correct.
Similarly, even long distance runners and marathon runners also, they run and then they slow down for some time. Sometimes
Yes.
they even have to sit in order to regain their breath and regain their
Right.
energy, drink some water, get refreshed, etc. So
Right.
human being can't continuously work.
Hmm. Correct.
It's not possible to continuously expound energy. The willpower mechanism, which is associated with the dopamine mechanism, also
Hmm.
goes down with time, basically.
Hmm.
And that's why we need that rest and refreshment, that is a good night's sleep, basically. So
Hmm.
that tomorrow morning or the next day morning, we can feel refreshed, so as to
Right.
say.
Right.
So it is, I think, non disputable to say that we can't work for 100% of the waking hours, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Also, there are biological requirements, like for example, we need to go to the washroom, we need to eat and things like that. We need to stay on top of personal hygiene and stuff like that, basically, right?
Right. Yeah.
So essentially, the work of a human being looks something like this. You can say, I'll draw it like this. Okay. So let us say this is like the waking hours for a person.
Hmm.
Okay. So there will be a time wherein which they have to do their biologically compulsory activities. So these are activities that are not necessarily going to bring them a lot of happiness, but these are just activities that they have to do. Like for example,
Right.
hygiene, the routine biological maintenance activities, like even eating food also, or even cooking a meal for some people will come under that domain, or
Yeah.
maintaining surroundings clean, basically, something like that, and hygienic. So basically, some amount of time will go into bioactivities, you can say.
Hmm.
Bioactivities. Some amount of time will go over here.
Right.
Then you can say that there will be a situation wherein which they are trying to get into flow. Okay, then now they are in flow,
Right.
and then after that, sometime they are tired, so now they need a break basically.
Right. Yeah.
So I have drawn this like this because it is kind of representative of going along the HD equal to HO line or something like
Okay.
that
Okay.
basically.
Okay. Right.
That's why
Right.
I've drawn it tilted basically. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when they are down, sometimes they may need to involve time in biological activities, like for example, calling parents or siblings or spouse or children or taking care of children and things like that. Basically,
Hmm.
cooking a meal for themselves and their loved ones.
Hmm.
So you can say bio maintenance activities that are just necessary, but they are not going to bring a lot of fulfillment or achievement also basically. But they are still necessary. Like you cannot do without them basically.
Hmm.
You can say such bio activities basically, right?
Right. Right.
And rest is also one such bioactivity, we can say.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we can say exercise falls under this. So you might not love exercise, but exercise is something that is kind of, we can even prove it to be compulsory bioactivity for
Okay.
maximizing utility, basically. Like
Right.
certain minimum amount of exercise has to be there kind of on a daily basis or a weekly basis.
Right.
So
Right.
sleep comes under this, sunlight,
Hmm.
nutrition,
Hmm.
and the well-being components in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
And then after completing these bioactivities, then later again they will try to get in a state of flow, have peak productivity, and then kind of again get tired. And
Right.
again they'll have to take care of some bioactivity or well-being component, so as to say basically.
Correct. Correct.
So we can say that this is like kind of one model basically of
Hmm.
work. And this model is not yet involving dopamine. So we are not saying that during the rest or bioactivity time frame,
Right.
they are indulging in dopaminism basically.
Right. Right.
So these are
Correct.
just normal biological activities like calling a loved one or let's say going to the washroom or eating a meal or cooking a meal or something like that basically. Okay.
Right. Right.
So we are not yet including hypernormal stimuli in this process
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm.
Now, if we do include hypernormal stimuli in this process, so this is the time wise thing that is happening basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time wise thing is this. But if let us say, yeah, if I try to rotate it like this, okay,
Huh.
time wise thing is like this. Let's look at what's happening with the net worth, net social capital, net effectiveness graphs as the
Hmm.
human being is making effort.
Yeah.
So, corresponding to this bout of effort, you can see these are bouts, right? Bout one,
Correct. Yeah.
bout two,
How
etc.
to say? No.
So, yeah, so on and so forth. So, these are bouts of effort. Okay. So, I'll even label them as B1, B2, etc. Right?
Yeah.
Corresponding to these bouts of efforts, their net worth is kind of tending to increase basically,
Hmm.
right now. So like all net worth versus time or net social capital versus time kind of goes along this trajectory as we have seen earlier, and later it may decline also.
Right.
You remember this particular trajectory, the
Yeah.
JS curve
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
net worth versus time or even social capital versus time,
Correct. Yeah.
even social capital versus time.
Yeah.
So basically we cannot say that this is not necessary, and see how closely this follows the emoti graph where we make an effort and get something
Yeah.
basically out.
Yeah.
So the emoti graph and the net worth versus time is also following the same trajectory, so as to say,
Correct. Yeah.
right? So we cannot say that going from point A to B, going from point A to B is
Hmm.
bad. We cannot say this
Hmm.
because unless we go from A to B, you cannot go from B to C and then from C to D.
Yeah.
Means unless you go and suffer in the gym, you cannot have very good physique basically.
Correct. Yeah.
So this, some people may say that okay, why don't you go from A to D? That's not how things work, right?
Correct.
Basically,
Yeah.
you have to suffer first in order to gain something. So
Yeah.
no pain, no gain. That's the basic logic, right here.
Yeah.
So if we are going from A to B, we cannot say that we are going backward or downward. We are going forward only in life, I am saying.
Hmm.
Even though the emoti graph, on the emoti graph, we have to represent it like this.
Right.
But we are not going backward in life. We are still going
Correct.
forwards only,
Correct. Correct.
basically.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's where this confusing concept may come up, basically, which may confuse, let's say, people who have not thought about it deeply yet. Okay. who are amateurs at this thinking, is that
Hmm.
happiness is everything or feelings are everything.
Hmm.
So happiness and feelings are just a like guide or rule of thumb guide basically.
Right. Yeah.
But happiness is not everything. Wholeness or eudaimonia or
Hmm.
contentment or fulfillment, that is
Hmm.
what we are aiming for,
Correct.
which
Yeah.
may imply that sometimes we suffer,
Yes. Yes.
which may imply necessary suffering, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the balance over here, basically, right?
Right.
So
Right.
there is also like I was myself confused about this because
Hmm.
emotion is related to willpower. Please understand that. Like people
Okay.
may feel angry and then hence may work hard and things like that. They may suffer and then work hard and things like that. Okay.
Right. Right.
So stoicism means lack of emotion, essentially.
Hmm.
Like you are not emotional. So basically, is stoicism opposite of emotionalism? Yes, it is. But then again, like what we are finding is that the resonance of personal efficacy as well as productivity happens at not 100% stoicism or 100% emotionalism. It happens
Hmm.
at 95% stoicism, 5% emotionalism, you can say.
Right.
And
Okay.
these particular and this pattern you will see repeating again and again now. Okay. So what we are talking about is, let's say, on a scale of stoicism to emotionalism, something like this. Or maybe I'll represent emotionalism towards the left hand side. Emotionalism to stoicism.
Choices. Right.
Yeah. Stoicism means absolute lack of emotions. Emotionalism means absolute lack of stoicism, basically, you can say.
Right. Right.
So 95% stoicism and 5% emotionalism. This is better even for efficacy and efficiency. It keeps you human and grounded rather than making you a robot, so as to say.
Hmm.
This is better. Even sometimes 90% also, and sometimes 99% stoicism is required, basically.
Right.
So think about it like this: that if our loved one or our parent passes away, then we want to feel a certain amount of grief, basically.
Hmm.
And that's where it gets confusing. That's why happiness is not the end all be all. Feelings are not the end all be all, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like if let us say feelings and happiness or even stoicism was the end all be all, then that means that grief should not be felt because you are feeling sad now, and feeling
Right.
sad is like minimizing your area of the under the utility time graph, right?
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
One way to think about this is there is a wholeness or there is a humanity, being human plane embedded within us, basically.
Right.
You know those planes that we talked about. One is like the
Ah. Yeah. Yeah.
spousal plane, one is the
Different
marital
pages. Yeah.
plane, one is the kids plane, one is the career plane, one is the health plane.
Correct.
So there is a being human or humanity plane within us. So if we are not feeling empathy and sadness and compassion, if if we are not positively correlated with the suffering of others around us, then that
Hmm.
means we are very less human and more psychopathic in nature, right?
Correct. Correct.
So that suffering is also necessary to not be psychopaths,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
this whatever minimum amount of emotionalism that is necessary, I have come to label it as serve emotions, SERVE. Yes. So what we are now trying to do is we are trying to represent emotionalism versus stoicism on on a scale, you can say, of
Right.
0 to 100. So 0 means emotionalism and 100 over here means stoicism, basically.
Choices.
Okay. So where should we be psychologically speaking? Where should we locate ourselves in general? So for that, like to get rid of the confusion, I went ahead with this particular acronym SERVE. So some amount of emotionalism is necessary or required.
Right.
S S here stands for stoic, E stands for emotionalism,
Hmm.
so empathetic,
Acha.
righteous,
Hmm.
voluntary. So we are voluntarily being emotional, basically. Voluntarily, we are, going slightly against the fundamental principles of stoicism, emotionalism. So this is what this acronym in my mind stands for, serve. Okay. So
Right.
we will find that the max utility or max efficiency out of life. Okay, and utility in terms of what? Not in terms of happiness, but in terms of wholeness or eudaimonia, basically.
Right. Right.
In terms of fulfillment and contentment. So
Correct.
utility in terms of that. Okay,
Hmm.
that's why here, even though On the emo T graph, this seems to be negative. That seems to be counterintuitive to the fact that, okay, we are having slightly less amount of happiness. Okay. But even though we are potentially having slightly less amount of happiness, we are having much more amount of what? We are having much more amount of
Utility.
wholeness or
Mm.
utility, wholeness based utility.
Yeah.
This is something that we can say,
Huh.
right? All right. So we will find that this principle kind of repeats, that the most efficient point psychologically to be at is neither complete emotionalism, neither complete stoicism. It is somewhere towards the direction of 95% stoicism basically, and 5%
Mm.
emotionalism, something like that,
Right.
right? So only 5% we are close to emotionalism, and 95% is covered by stoicism over here. So you
Right.
can say that this entire line represents the psychological state of being inside a human being. So 5% is emotionalism and 95% is stoicism, basically. All
Right.
right. All right. Now let's come back to this particular graph. Again, I am repeating, there are some biological principles or biological activities, biological requirements, so as to say.
Right.
Like, for example, you may need to pay your taxes, right, on time. So that
Mm.
is a biological or sociological requirement, you can say. It's, you don't enjoy paying your taxes or doing your taxes, but then you have to get to it, na, at some point in
Right.
time. Right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Then there is some part of time wherein which you are entering flow, then you are highly productive basically, and then you
Mm.
are like kind of entering the rest state after 1 2 3 hours, etc. Then again
Right.
you are taking care of bioactivities or well-being or just resting. Just resting is also a biological need, please
Right.
understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then again you are continuing these cycles. So this cycle is where these cycles are how you spend your waking time, so as
Mm.
to say.
Correct.
So based upon how you are spending your waking time, your efficiency in life is going to be determined basically, right?
Mm. Correct.
Okay. Now there are some principles associated with this, okay, that I will now elaborate. So
Okay.
in this, sometimes what happens is your activity goes down to zero, that we call a sleep or complete rest basically.
Mm.
So sometimes it's going to be like this. So this is like a sleep time,
Right.
full rest.
Right.
Okay. Sometimes, okay, then again, yeah, then again, while this continues, then again, after waking up, you might require some biological time. You might require some time wherein which you are getting into flow, then you are productive, then you are cooling down. So as to say, warm up and cool down, right? Inside the gym. So something
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah. So you might be cooling down after some time.
Yeah.
And after that, again, you might have to take care of biological activities or well-being. And this is how the cycle continues, so as to say,
Right.
right?
Right.
Now, as we are working or pushing the envelope, so as to say, biologically speaking, what is
Mm.
exactly happening? As we are pushing the envelope biologically, our net worth is increasing or going through this cycle, or we are progressing along the net worth versus time or social capital versus time
Correct.
graph.
Correct. Huh.
Make sense?
Yeah.
And if we are resting, if at when the time is that we are resting, the net worth is just flat. The net worth is just flat. Can you see?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And when again we go into the flow state, the net worth again is on this ascent, basically, that kind of a thing.
Mm. Mm.
Then again, while we are resting, the net worth is flat. So
Right.
this is so basically like this is kind of ill-defined because we don't know what part of the net worth curve or social capital curve we are at, now,
Right.
basically.
Right. Huh. ठीक है.
If you think about it very deeply, this is also how close friendships are also formed, right? Like people
Mm.
spend time with each other, exchange thoughts, and have shared experiences, etc. Because of that, social capital and bonding increases. So
Correct. Yeah.
initially, they have to do that investment of being with each other.
Right.
Now, things can be a good investment or things can be a dopaminergic investment, which is a bad investment based upon who
Uh,
that person is. So,
right. Right.
if that person is very needy and very always wanting, and never giving or never thinking
Uh,
in a win-win manner, then that means that is a bad investment, basically. Right.
mm.
So
Right.
just like real estate, people or businesses, people can also be good or bad investments, basically.
Right.
It's not necessary that all people are always good investments, and bad investments are going to leech your time in the future. They are
Right.
going to like reduce your emoji graph or
Hmm.
sync your emoji graph basically. So no investment is sometimes better than bad investment, you can say.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
So unless you have got the right quality of friends and very good friends around you, your
Right.
emoji graph will be sunk because of the sunk uh, emoji graph of people around you basically, and then they will blame you also for not correlating with their emotions and things like that
Correct.
basically.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So if they are suffering, then you are also supposed to suffer basically.
Right. Yeah.
If you are not going to suffer, that means you are not a good friend. So as you move ahead in life, your friend circle also tends to change naturally. And if it doesn't change, the people who have not moved ahead in life with you are going to tend to or try to pull you down basically. This is
Hmm.
inherent in the human nature or human psyche.
Right. Right.
And they might not be deliberately trying to pull you down also, but their circumstances will pull you down because you are now supposed to prove empathy and loyalty and fealty by feeling bad when they are in misery. And mostly they
Hmm.
will be in misery compared to you
Correct.
if you are more financially successful. So,
Correct.
as you ascend financially in life, it is important to also have friends who are also ascending or make new friends who are already at that level, preferably
Hmm.
ethically at that level, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then only you are safeguarding yourself. Like if you are having friends who are much below you, then it will so happen that you will just end up solving everybody's problems and not getting anything much back in return, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is another example of what we can call as auction winner's loss. So
Right.
you might
Right.
be thinking that you are gaining and winning their friendship, but what you gave up in return was much more valuable compared to gaining that friendship, basically.
Right. Right.
So this is another phenomena of auction winner's loss, basically, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
Okay. Now here, this is what is happening to the practical time spent, you can say,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes there is rest and sleep like this. Okay.
Correct.
Now, now below the practical time spent, let's understand what's happening to the emoji graph, basically. Emoji
Okay.
graph.
Okay.
All right. So for emoji graph, maybe I can draw it like this. Yeah. So for the emoji graph, as you are making this effort, in the effort plane you are sinking, but in the purpose and meaning plane you are ascending, basically. Got it?
Right. Correct. Yeah.
So, like obviously there will be two curves because I cannot draw two different planes here, basically. So
Ah.
in the
Yeah.
purpose and meaning plane you are ascending, and in the
Right.
effort plane you are sinking. Now
Right.
this slowly you grow into loving the effort. So again, I will say that find something that you love to do for a lifetime is a misnomer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Grow into loving something that is giving you the results in life, that is the correct philosophy, or
Right. Right.
more correct. The
Correct.
philosophies can be less correct and more correct, right, basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
So this is a much more correct philosophy, that grow into loving something that is giving you results in life.
Yeah.
That is a more correct philosophy,
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than try to find something that you love to do in life and
Hmm.
try to
Hmm.
earn money because of that. Because what if like you don't have possess any skill set that is correlated with the market, then what?
Correct. Yeah. That's right.
Let's say for example you are a very good maid, but then still your work is still linear in time, right?
Yeah.
Even if you are a very good maid and let's say you clean the house and keep the house neat and clean, and you are perfect in cooking clothes and cooking food and like ironing clothes and things like that. So you are
Right.
perfect in all these things basically. For the house management purpose you are perfect. But
Right.
then, do you think that a maid is going to become a multi-millionaire or multi-billionaire unless she gets lucky or starts a business? Now, if she starts a business which provides maid services, then she is no longer a maid.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
Now she's a business person basically.
Correct.
He or she is a business person in this particular case, right?
Yeah.
So the idea over here is this, that you, uh, you are increasing your purpose points, you can say, or purpose oriented happiness, you can say, and
Hmm.
sinking down into the effort graph. That is true,
Right. Right.
right? And that is all a human being can do, right? Like think about it, like you can't control all the things in life, so you can control only those things that you can control. Literally other things are out of your control.
Right.
So there is this philosophy of doing the best, the stoicism oriented philosophy of doing the best and forgetting the rest, basically, right?
Right. Right.
Correct. So
Right.
the thing is this, that here this increases and this decreases. But then what happens? See, because this has decreased, this gives you the reward of some elevated graph for a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
So if
Correct.
you look at the next moment, if you look at the next moment, this increase is there, but then some elevation is there because of the effort of the previous moment.
Hmm. You're adding both the planes basically,
Yes, yes. Now in the next thing, what happens is some effort is there, like
Hmm.
some that happiness is there, and then one more gets added basically.
Right.
So
Correct.
your emoji graph is slightly shifting up and up and up basically with time.
Right. Right.
And I have dwelled very much in this to a lot of depth actually.
Hmm.
I have also studied like edge cases like this. Like for example, what if a person never feels bad about missing out on work or something like that?
Okay.
But this
Okay.
does not happen. How you feel, see, this is where that logic comes in. That the cognitively aware part of your mind is only 5%.
Hmm.
95% of your brain processes and biological processes
Right.
you are not aware about, or
Right.
even more, sometimes more also. So it's not like you have a choice about feeling bad or not feeling bad, basically.
Hmm.
So sociological reality is going to make you feel bad if you are not working.
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
like you are cognitively choosing what I will choose to
Correct.
not feel bad because I have not worked, basically, something like
Right.
that.
Right.
It's not
Right.
like you are, yeah, it's not like you have a choice.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
consciously, subconsciously, it will get hit, it will get connected, you will get affected basically
Okay.
because
Okay.
of, and it's not even like okay, I'll feel bad, but I'll feel bad only for 2 minutes, but for the rest 24 hours, almost like the 23 hours, 58 minutes, etc. I'll feel good or I'll feel neutral at least basically. It doesn't work like that also basically. Okay, think about it like this. Uh, let me again go for an extreme example. Let's say you are you are fired from a job for no apparent mistake of yours basically, let's
Hmm.
assume. Okay,
Okay.
and because of some nepotism or some reservation policy, somebody else who is less deserving than you actually takes up that particular position that you earlier
Right.
occupied. Okay,
Right.
then it's not like you have a choice basically. You will feel bad for as long as you will feel bad. You can
Hmm.
try to mitigate it with stoicism and action basically, and maybe instead of 60 days you can feel bad for 30 days, but it certainly is not going to be 2 days basically or one day.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and similarly, it is so said that okay, paraplegics and people who undergo accidents, etc., they again come back to the hedonic set point. But then, if they think about this, that okay, earlier they were very handsome and dashing, and they could have
Right.
had any sexual mate of their choice, but
Right.
and they could have started a business that requires legs and feet to run, operate, etc. And now, obviously, their abilities are limited, right? They are more
Correct.
externally dependent, correct?
Correct. Huh.
So given that these things they are missing out on, how is it possible according to the emoti graph that they will always be at the hedonic set point? No, they won't be, right? So there will always be that lingering feeling that they lost something basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
On a
Hmm.
day-to-day basis they might be like a cheerful, normal, cheerful person, etc., and they
Right.
might obfuscate these feelings of loss also, but
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
they will be there, those lingering feelings will be there. Now, if they were already like a relatively mediocre or relatively moderate person, and already if they did not have any aspirations of finding the best possible mate for them or establishing a business, and this additional loss does not really impact them a lot, then they will not feel anything. So
But this,
psychologically, the potential opportunity cost will make them feel a certain way.
so Zenith, actually, this is a very interesting,
Yes.
interesting one you picked. Because this is something that even I had thought of, but
Hmm.
I didn't have the answer to this. That especially
Hmm.
like the example you mentioned, that something happens in life,
Hmm.
right? Something huge happens in life, like say getting handicapped, or which
Hmm.
seriously changes your trajectory,
Hmm.
right? Or something major happened which caused. Let's keep it. Let me take an umbrella, or let me take the superset of that. Like something major happens which you couldn't control, and which causes like
Yeah, a black swan event happens in your life.
some
Like
black swan
COVID,
event
COVID
happen.
was
Very negative.
COVID was an example
Yeah,
for it.
so very negative one.
Hmm.
uh, so yeah, I think you mentioned that, yeah, many folks do say that there is this claim out there that you do like this hedonic adaptation happens to a negative this thing also, so you tend to forget, you tend to accept it. But
Hmm.
now you mentioned that yeah, even I had this thought that, but it is still there lingering, right? So how do you plot that mathematically, that
So
lingering feeling that comes?
mathematically, there is a plane that is the mate selection plane. There is a plane that is the business success plane, right?
Right, okay, okay,
So
so it will be just negative.
you get sunken graphs in those particular planes, which will
Hmm.
make your average go down.
Correct, correct.
You can deploy stoicism and stoic philosophies like do your best, forget the rest, control only what you can, the serenity prayer, like
Correct, correct.
give me the. So those things will make the graphs go down less,
Okay, okay.
but doesn't mean it will be zero.
So is there an element of focusing on different planes also? Because maybe like suppose a black swan event happens to me. Suppose
Yeah,
say somebody dies or something, for example, say a loved
yeah,
one dies.
yeah,
Let's take that example. So I'll
yeah.
be more sad on average on in the first couple of months, say. So is it
Correct,
because I'm more focused on that plane and then later that that plane's graph still
correct,
remains negative, but
correct. So naturally, there is a natural trajectory, and there is something that you can do to control it. So natural,
right.
biological, cultural trajectory is that, like let's say if somebody very close to us dies, okay,
Mm-hmm.
meets an unfortunate end because of some disease or accident or something like that, then
Right.
at that point in time, we are going to be naturally sad earlier, basically.
Correct, correct. Yeah.
And later, other priorities of life, the further things of life, and rationalizations such as what would they want me to be, sad or happy, like that.
Mm-hmm.
These kind of rationalizations will imply that you as a human being are also an entropic entity. Please understand that.
Okay.
So later the grief is going to reduce. Maybe some grief is very deep and will take a lot of months or even years to get over.
Mm-hmm.
Some grief will always be like a dagger in the heart, and probably for the entire lifetime that person may carry that grief, something like that.
Right, right.
And again, I am telling you that that grief is not bad. It makes us whole, basically. Okay.
Okay, okay, okay.
Of course, it should not be extra excess in amount, basically.
Right, correct, correct.
So it is kind of it kind of is like appropriately it should be proportional to that particular event. Like for example,
Okay.
if a set of parents loses their child unfortunately, then
Hmm.
this grief will be long lasting, and this was very unforeseen and very unfortunate compared to if a child or a grown man loses his parents, let's say when they are very old. So
Correct.
this grief is like relatively should be less because it is more natural for people to die when they are very old
Hmm.
compared to if let's say somebody dies young and passes away prematurely and they had a lot of life in front of them and so on and so forth. Then
Right,
that grief will be much higher.
right,
So basically, there is appropriate, you can say, decay constant or the die down time for grief. Basically,
right,
for sociopaths and psychopaths, like this grief will instantaneously disappear or disappear in
correct.
1 2 days, or they might even be feigning grief. Basically,
Right, right.
for people who are entrenched in emotionalism, this grief will last for years and years and years.
Hmm.
And this
Hmm.
is exactly why I have this principle of serve emotions, right? So
Right, yeah.
appropriate grief should exist, and appropriately at appropriate points in time, it should reduce also, and it should
Hmm.
then become zero also, and you should focus upon your work also, basically.
Right, right. Okay, okay.
And all of this is why to make you as a unit of humanity, as a single unit contributor of humanity, more efficient, so that
Hmm.
humanity can be longer lasting and more robust and more sustainable.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right?
Okay, right,
That's
right.
why the
Yeah.
framework of serve emotions is there basically. And
Right,
same
right.
goes if we meet with a black swan event and have an accident and lose our limb or something like also, same thinking goes ahead. That's why see will all these things that we are documenting here will keep coming back to. That's why I have thought
Hmm.
very deeply about this basically. That's why these serve emotions exist.
Right, right.
Got it, no?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's look at this. So this is something that we were documenting that okay in one plane in the attempt plane they are getting satisfaction, and in the effort plane they are being slightly negative, but subsequently they are being positive basically, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's look at what happens. Let's say while resting biologically, let's say the person decides to eat ice cream. Okay.
Okay. Right.
So when they decide to eat ice cream, biologically, actually, they are hurting themselves because ideally, zero sugar is good.
Correct.
Ideally speaking, zero sugar is good, even
Right.
though the human body likes sugar and sweets a lot.
Right.
But ideally speaking, zero sugar is good. So that
Right.
means, like, let's say while biologically resting, let's say I'll draw this in pink or some, yeah, red or pink, yeah. They
Sure.
indulge in dopaminism. So biologically, they are hurting themselves. See,
Hmm.
but biologically hurting themselves because this is related to more related to time, right? So we can just put it like this, basically,
Okay.
like this.
Yeah.
Effectiveness, you can say like this. Matlab, here they ate, you can say, sugar. So we can just put this as time. Okay.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
they ate sugar or drank some drinks, etc., their net worth also decreased a little. Think. So basically, let's say if somebody eats an ice cream, then their net worth decreases by some amount. Here I have shown it
Right.
exaggerated because, like, generally speaking, people who eat ice cream are addicted to ice cream, so they always want to eat ice cream and so on and so forth. Basically, now
Right.
you can
Right.
extrapolate this to alcohol and socializing and gambling and things like that, basically, right?
Right.
So basically here they are just spending some time
Hmm.
in eating ice cream. Okay, now I have not drawn this as a peak or a trough over here because it can be a peak, it can go down also. Means it can
Right.
kind of increase their efficiency or decrease it also. That depends. Now
Hmm.
that
Correct.
depends upon if they are doing it in this 95-5 ratio. That's what I mean to say,
Right. Okay.
basically.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
okay. Yeah, so here, according to the emotion time graph, what is exactly happening? Okay,
Right.
in the emotion time graph, at this point when they ate ice cream, basically, they are getting a spike like this,
Right.
right? And then it will be followed by a small crash, which they will
Correct.
recover from,
Correct.
something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if this is too frequent,
Hmm.
okay, then what will happen is they will be able to work less and less, and because of that, their flow state will crash. Hence,
Hmm.
hence their
Right.
net worth will also crash, and then their
Right.
emotions will also crash, basically.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and if this is too infrequent, if this is not done only,
Hmm.
then now mark my words, okay, then they are not deriving 200% utility and deriving only 100 or 80 or 90% utility.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Now I will explain about this 200% utility. Okay, I will explain.
Okay. Okay.
Let us say we say to you, okay, or we say to any individual human, okay, let's
Hmm.
say that individual human's name is John, let's assume, okay.
Okay.
So we say, dear John,
Hmm.
in the entire lifetime from now till death, you are
Hmm.
not supposed to eat anything you like. You're not supposed to eat sugar. You're not supposed to fornicate. No, okay, you are not supposed to have sex. You're not
Hmm.
supposed to watch porn. You're not supposed to do anything that is biologically appealing to you. You're supposed to only work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then John will be demotivated, right?
Right.
Because biologically speaking, even though the human knows that dopaminergic or hypernormal stimuli are rare, the human being wants to work hard and achieve that, basically.
Hmm.
The problem comes when the human is achieving that without working hard and
Hmm.
destroying or demolishing the sociological reality and others and being unethical in the process of achieving that, basically.
Right. Right. Right.
So, for example, eating ice cream and socially bonding with family, let's say with between husband, wife, kids, and parents, grandparents, siblings, etc., is actually a good phenomena if they are actually bonding with each other, right?
Right.
But if, let's say, a couple is in love with each other, then having sex is actually a good phenomena,
Hmm.
and that is keeping them mentally and psychologically healthy, and hence they are being good contributors towards humanity, and they are
Correct.
committed and living together for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So it's a good phenomena.
Yeah.
So all dopaminergic activity may not be bad with respect to the ultimate aims of humanity, which is sustainability, survival, thriving, flourishing, etc.
Right. Right. Right.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
It is when it becomes unethical, it is when it goes in excess, and it is when people hurt sociological reality in order to selfishly be dopaminergic.
Hmm.
That is when they also suffer, and eventually humanity also suffers, basically.
Right. Right.
Again, we come back to this 95-5 principle.
Hmm.
Now, if let us say there is going to be celebration after victory or reward after targets achieved,
Hmm.
then the person will work extra hard for achieving those targets, right? That is how
Correct.
the dopamine mechanism, motivation mechanism works like that only inside the human brain and mind.
Right. Right. Correct.
So if there are no rewards, then the person will just complete their time and just chill basically. And
Ah.
they will live a very mediocre life. Are you getting it? Only
Right.
when there are rewards, then only they can live an active, productive, ethical life basically.
Correct.
So that's why this 5% of reward is also very important because it gives double efficiency or even 2.5x or 3x efficiency to the 95% of active effort.
Yes. Right.
So it's not like spending 5% of time is reducing your 5% of work time.
Hmm.
It may be, but then that 95% is 2x or 3x basically
Correct. Correct.
because you will pump in more effectiveness in that 95%.
Yeah.
And if you are told to just work 100% of the times and have zero dopaminism, then you will just work with a slouched back and with slouched shoulders and in a very
Hmm.
bad mental state because no reward is going to be there. So it's like being a prisoner basically or a slave
Right. Right.
to your or anybody else's decision making basically.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So for peak efficiency, humans need rest, humans need biological well-being components that we once talked about, and then they need 5% dopaminism also.
Hmm.
So a day-to-day activity cycle should something be like this: that biology, flow state, that is productivity, biology, productivity, biology, and 5% or less dopaminism. Okay.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Now all of this needs to be automated by habits, basically, right?
Hmm.
Because humans don't have that much amount of willpower on a day-to-day basis. I have tried this and I have failed at it also to
Right.
calculate in
Okay.
real time whether this particular activity is good for me or not.
Okay. Okay.
That is where the power of habits comes in basically.
Hmm.
So it might be so that on some particular day, not going to the gym and working 15 hours instead of 13 hours and skipping the gym for 2 hours might actually mean that on that particular day business prospered a lot
Right.
or your career prospered a lot.
Right.
But then are you going to calculate on a daily basis basically? Okay,
Hmm.
today is it going to be gym? What's the ratio be? Like today, what's the
Correct.
ratio? What's the ratio
Correct.
and proportion? Okay, what is the gym time to social time to family time to work time to dopa time to sleep time to rest time to what are the types of rest well-being? So calculating, I have tried doing this on a real-time basis. It's not feasible basically. So
Hmm.
again, this happens because of the limitation of the human intellectual bandwidth in general.
Right. Right.
So I have bumped against the walls of human reality and personal, like interpersonal reality, personal reality, self-efficacy a lot. Tried and tested a lot of things. So
Right.
practically, empirically, I am saying that that's where habits come into play.
Hmm.
So habits look something like this: like you have to brush your teeth twice or thrice a day, necessarily so. So you
Right.
might be so deeply entrenched in work that you might forget to brush your teeth and like okay, some people may laud and applaud you that okay, kudos how deeply he is working and like he is so much in deep work zone, etc. etc. But then is it sustainable over a long period? And we know that compounding results come from sustained productivity rather than peak productivity on 1 day or 2 days basically.
Correct.
So that means once you have a schedule, then you have to automate it using habits basically.
Hmm. Yeah.
As much as possible. See, some
Hmm.
dynamism always happens in human life. Like for example, COVID happened, so habits needed to change, etc.
Right.
Like
Right.
I couldn't cook earlier. I had to learn to cook, so on and so forth. Example. So
Hmm.
the point being this that you have to set into a cycle and then automate it using habits, basically. Right?
Right.
So
Right.
that you don't have to compute on a day-to-day basis as to what you need to do.
Hmm.
And this may give you some delta x error that you may lose some amount of efficiency because that one day you could have skipped gym and could have worked upon your career on the or some other day career anyway was not going to happen that according to that 80-20 principle, like you are busy doing 80% of the ineffective stuff in your career rather than 20% of the effective stuff, so on and
Right.
so forth, right?
Right.
So you could have spent 2 hours more in the gym and then hence gotten an extra output. But then over the long run, this is where I was getting confused when I met you. Like
Okay.
I was asking you, like, okay, is 13-14 hours of productivity correct or 16-17 hours correct, basically?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and what is it basically? So the idea is this, like, you can fixate upon something which is like a normal intuition based answer. okay,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is more in the right ballpark rather than the wrong ballpark, basically, something like that. So,
Okay.
for example, what should be the legal driving age? Should it be 16 years or 18 years or 20 years or what? See, it should definitely not be 10 years. It should definitely not be
Hmm.
30 years,
Correct.
right? Doesn't mean it should be exactly at the middle also. That also is not correct. So
Hmm.
maybe it should be 16 years, maybe it should be 17, maybe it should be 18 or something like that. We can fix it with like some intuition and some sociological, you can say voting, you can say something
Right.
like that,
Right.
taking some feedback. So 15 also seems too early. 19, 20 seems too late. Okay, so we can now kind of zoom down upon an interval. Like, okay, 16 to 18, then what should it be basically? Like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Example.
Right.
So we can, like, for example, I was wondering whether 13 hours of work is correct on a daily basis or 15 or 16 or etc. So I fixated upon 14 basically, which is kind of a rule of thumb thing. So that doesn't mean that every single day I'm doing 14. Sometimes it is 12, sometimes it is 17 also basically.
Right. Right.
But I have some rule of thumb automated habit forming behavior,
Right.
which will lead to some amount of some proper productivity basically,
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
some flexibility, which
Right.
happens because of daily variance basically, like that.
Right. Right.
And now I'm not doing 17 but only doing 14. So the 3 hours of well-being and rest that I'm getting and the slight amount of dopamine, if I choose to go for it on that particular day, is
Hmm.
actually going to pump in more efficiency in my actual 12 to 14 hours of work.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why sometimes it is better to not do 17 but do only 13 or 14 or 12.
Hmm. Right.
So it is said now that consistency is the king basically, right? Consistency is like the most important thing, even while gymming and exercising and things like
Yeah.
that as
Yeah.
well, right? So for instance, like let us say a person can max gym and work a lot in the gym basically, and work for, you can say, 3 hours or 4 hours. Let's say working 4 hours in the gym is their max. Okay.
Right.
Even if they
Right.
are an athlete or something like that, then
Right.
also they should probably work for 2 hours only
Yeah.
for the sake of sustainability. Because by giving 4 hours in the gym, it's not like it's they are giving 4 hours or they are not giving 4 hours. Human life is finite. And
Hmm.
because human life is finite, when they are giving 4 hours in the gym, then some other part they are suffering opportunity costs for in some
Hmm.
other area
Correct.
of life, basically.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
So, for example, they might not be able to take care of their investments that effectively, or they
Right.
might not be able to take care of developing social relationships that effectively, or they
Right.
might not be able to podcast or record videos and develop social capital and professional capital that effectively, so on
Right.
and so forth. Or they
Right.
might be lacking on rest, just simply speaking.
Hmm.
So, this brings us to what I call the min max principle, basically. So,
Okay.
in everything, there is a minimum that a person should do, and then there is a maximum that a person should do. Are you getting it?
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
There is a minimum that a person should do, and there is a maximum. So, these are the min max limits.
Right.
The min max limit. So, for example, minimum 1 hour a person should exercise for 6 days a week, or at
Correct.
least 5 days a week, basically. So
Ah.
this is like okay. Some people's min estimate might be off compared to some other people, or not. Two people may not agree. Two persons may not agree upon what is the min estimate or what's the max estimate.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it does not exist. It
Hmm.
exists for every single human individual, basically,
Hmm.
right? So there is a minimum like legal driving age. There is a maximum legal driving age. So this is the min
Correct.
max principle.
Right.
And whatever is the margin in between them is the margin of fluctuation, or margin of, you can say, adaptability, adjustment,
Hmm.
flexibility. You can say the flexibility margin. So
Right.
on some days you might work out for 2 hours, some days you might work out for 4 hours also. But if you are saying that you will work out for 10 hours every day, then that is like kind of beyond the max,
Correct.
logical max, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So in personal productivity, we have to take care of automation. I will kind of, I think, write it down here.
Huh.
Automation, and then we have got the min max
Min
principle.
max. Hmm.
And automation is as per habits.
Yeah.
Okay, now I will mention another very powerful concept over here, integrated living. Okay, so let's take the example of integrated living. Like, let's say, for example, a parent is taking care of their children, and at the same time, they are working also. Let's say they are a coder and they are working on the
Right.
laptop, and on the side, they are taking care of their children. Okay,
Right.
so at the same time they are fulfilling two duties, right? Beyond three it becomes very difficult. Let's say the
Hmm.
parent may also be sitting on like as the restaurant owner, they might be sitting at the counter of the restaurant and coding and taking care of their child. So
Right,
indirectly they're taking care of the restaurant as well as coding as well as taking care of their child.
right,
Okay.
right,
So beyond three to four activities, it becomes very difficult for the human cognitive mind to adapt and execute
right,
this.
right.
Right. So this is the meaning of integrated living. Like another example is like, why do most people don't want to go back to the workplaces after COVID? Because in COVID, once they discovered that they can work from their own houses, right?
Um,
Then their life was quite integrated.
hmm.
Like they are being able to spend time with family, take care of
Correct.
kids, like spend time with spouse, parents, etc. And then also being able to work and probably work out also, exercise as well.
Yeah.
Because if two, three, four components are properly taken care of, like one is career, one is health, one is social life, etc., then
Hmm.
at least the person will not be depressed or not like fall down
Hmm.
into depression. And as you
Right.
know, that depression and mental health crisis is ubiquitous in our society and in general in the world also, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Happens because of social media comparison, lack of resources,
Right,
competition for resources. But then there are some, these are like some basic key things that can be done against it, basically, right?
right.
So another example is ergonomics, which I consider as a subset of integrated living only.
Okay.
So ergonomics is how we arrange our work environment, essentially.
Right, right. Okay.
So
Hmm.
for one example of ergonomics would be, I would say, electronic devices. Like I have a separate video also about the same, because
Okay.
all our work, or at least all my work, is on electronic devices only. Like my office is literally electronic devices, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Rather than a physical space. So the electronic devices, if they are, let's say, not of the highest quality that I can afford at that point in time, then I'm really reducing my efficiency. Personal efficacy and personal efficiency is
Yes.
extremely being reduced, basically, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because can you imagine that on a i3 processor, I will have to work for 10 hours compared to 2 hours on a i7 or i9 processor, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that literally happens, basically. So
Okay.
if if I or if somebody can afford it for the sake of efficiency and effectiveness, if they can afford the highest model of that particular mobile or brand or something like that, basically whatever is the
Right.
flagship model, if they are not using it, then they are
Right.
reducing their efficiency a lot based upon ergonomics, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Correct.
ergonomics will also include chair and sitting arrangements and things like that, basically. Like for
Yeah.
example, if there are multiple people working in the room, and then who has the authority to speak or make phone calls? Because if there are multiple phone calls, there is going to be audio disturbance, right?
Correct. Correct.
Basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is the meaning of ergonomics. Like for example, now people are working online and remotely, mostly, right? So is there any great amount of value that one might gain by buying some house or something like that in the middle of the city, as opposed to out on the outskirts of the city? Because on the outskirts of the city, you might get a larger area, right?
Right. Yeah.
And hence because of that, the ergonomic situation wherein which the husband is working in some separate room, the wife is working in some separate
Hmm.
room, there is an attached office or whatever, something like that. So that
Yeah.
kind of a scenario might get created, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
The kids have their own separate playing space, and if there is a nanny, then the nanny is taking care of kids and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of a scenario might be there, right? So this
Hmm.
is the meaning of ergonomics. So ergonomics is also related to integrated living, right?
Right. Right.
So, for example, if another example of integrated living, I'll give you. So, I have a friend. Now they live on the first and the second floor, and the ground floor. On the ground floor, they operate a restaurant, basically.
Acha. Okay.
Now, whenever they want, they can eat good restaurant food, healthy food in the restaurant, basically, right?
Right. Right.
So, because the chefs and the cooks they are employing, so irrespective of like, so they will have quality control. I mean to say.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
they will decide that okay, in their food no added added for taste or color, no added ingredient should be used, etc. So they
Right.
can choose to cook their food in a very healthy manner by
Hmm.
using the chef. Now you might be knowing that the chefs are not working in the restaurant for all the time that they are employed, basically, right?
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
And even if they are employed, like basically by having a attached restaurant, their lifetime cost of paying to a chef goes away, because
Hmm.
the restaurant business itself is paying to the chef, right?
Right. 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 So the, correct.
Are you getting
Yeah.
it? So basically, they are getting chef services as free
Right.
for a lifetime.
Right.
And similarly, almost food is also okay. They are consuming their own food, yes, but anyway, it was going to be bought for the restaurant at wholesale rate. So they kind of
Mhm.
get their food at wholesale rates basically. And
Right,
food is like a fundamental requirement of a human being, right?
right, good.
So if this is possible, then why not have a restaurant nearby only, like wherein which we are employing some people, or even instead of a cloud kitchen, if you have that extra amount of space, then your one room or one kitchen, etc., can also become a cloud kitchen for somebody, some brand, or even your own brand, right? At
Right,
least like
right.
a small dabba type of center, basically. So
Mhm.
because of this, the cook is auto paid for, right?
Right, yeah.
So cook will also find employment always, and you will also get integrated living. So this is the meaning of what I call as integrated living,
Integrated.
basically.
Got it. Right.
So you are integrating various different outcomes that you want out of life,
Mhm.
basically,
Mhm.
and finding ways to achieve that outcome in the same amount of time,
Right. Yeah.
not giving any extra amount of time for the same, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So this is another efficiency technique, basically. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Then next is leverage and delegation.
Right.
Leverage and delegation.
Hmm.
So just think about it. Why is a stock market investor who has a very large portfolio, why are they not working? Or why are most of them actively not working? Or even if they don't actively work, then also they are not suffering a lot, because there are so many human individuals that are working on their behalf. Now, think.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Let's imagine a portfolio of 100 CR. Let's say that that portfolio is giving a 10% return per
Hmm.
annum. Okay.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
every year they are earning 100 and well,
Okay.
10 CR. Out of that, let's say the entire family spends only 1 CR, let us say,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
also huge amount, by the way, in
Yeah.
1 year to spend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then first year their net worth was 100 CR. Second year it was 109 CR. Now they earn
Right.
10%, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
now they have 10.9 CR basically. Now they spend 1 CR out of that. Okay.
Hmm.
So let's write this down.
Huh.
Initially, they started with 100 CR.
That's here.
Okay. So after 1 year, they have 110 CR, out of which they spend 1 CR. The the leftover is 109 CR. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next year they have 109 plus 10.9. Sorry.
Correct.
Yeah, 10.9
Yeah.
CR. Yeah,
Plus
that's
10.9. Yeah.
yeah, 10.9 CR. So they have 119.9 CR. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
So here also they spend 1 CR. So they are left with 118.9 CR. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
So the next year also they are earning, let us say, 10%. Every, like, let's assume 10% basically for now, for
Right.
simplicity. Okay.
Right.
So now they have how much? 118, 10%. So
One.
11.89 CR extra they have. 118.9
Yeah.
plus 11.89 CR. Okay.
Hmm.
So now out of this they spent one. So this is 10.89 they have. Okay. So
Correct. Yeah.
118.9 plus
Huh.
10.89. So
Yeah.
this will be 129 CR approximately.
Hmm. ठीक है.
Yeah, approximately it may even be 130, but I'm just
Like
taking
yeah.
one to
Like you
repeat.
want. Yeah. Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So see what's happening basically. So after a certain amount of wealth, basically, you can
Hmm.
just take a certain small percentage share. And
Yeah.
this is even I am taking 10% from their earnings. Are you thinking
Right.
what I'm saying
Right. Yeah.
basically?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my advocacy is to take only 5%.
Only five. Correct.
But still we are taking 10%. Still the portfolio is also increasing. And even if we take, let's say, increasing 10% incremental, like for example, in the first year we took 1 CR, in the second year we took incremental 10%, so 1.1 CR. Getting it now? So
Hmm.
in the third year
Correct. Yeah.
I am taking like incremental, so I took 1.21 CR. Then
Hmm.
also the portfolio will also increase, and the money that you're extracting from it will also increase basically.
Right. Right.
So that is that compounding effect once you reach a heavy critical mass basically, right?
Hmm. Right.
The idea is to make sure that you don't destroy capital and only take this limited amount basically. That's the
Right.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in terms of graphs and runway, so this is a very good way to explain it basically. Okay. So
Hmm.
let's say, for example, let's look at kind of like net worth but not exactly net worth. So you can say runway versus time.
Okay.
Runway versus time. Okay. So
Hmm.
what a person wants, like, multiply your monthly expenses by 12, you get yearly expenses multiplied by the number of years you expect to live for on this earth now. Let's
Okay.
say 60, 70, etc., whatever it is. है ना? So 70 years into your yearly expense, basically, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that if you have that already stored in the bank account, don't you think that on the financial plane, your emotions, emotigraph is going to be quite high and satiated, right?
Right. Right. Correct. Yeah.
So I choose to draw like this. Like this is the runway currently. Today you have this runway. Today
Right.
per unit time or per unit, yeah, per unit time you are expending this much. So expense is this much. You can say, okay, this is the expense, and per unit time you are earning this much. This is your earning basically. Okay. So
Right.
earning, expense, and what is in between is the runway.
Hmm.
So what you want in life, huh? Let's understand this. This is also a very important plotting. What you
Right.
want in life is that expense initially increases, but it should kind of flatten off basically. So expense
Hmm.
versus
Hmm.
time should be flat. So it will not exactly be flat because inflation happens. So it will be
Right.
having a small
Steady growth.
slope, preferably equal to the inflation and not more than that basically. Okay.
Okay.
And now this is where how business people think is different from how non-business people think. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Business
Okay.
business people think that okay, they will destruct the runway. That means they will invest in their own business. Let's say in the form of advertisement or hiring a new
Uh,
staff or personnel or branding efforts and so on and so forth. So they will destruct some amount of runway,
hmm.
but they will earn higher than what they destructed. So in the
Right.
next unit, their earning will be like this, and then their runway will technically have reduced. But then they
Hmm.
will say that okay, because my earning was more and my
Hmm.
expenses were kind of flatlining, my kind of next runway is actually here.
Correct. Correct.
So technically, even though runway should reduce by this amount,
Hmm.
because their see runway is changing by earning minus expense, right?
Right. Right.
So
Correct.
earning is greater than expense, so their runway increases.
Yep.
Runway increases. If earning
Yep.
is greater than expense, then we can say that runway increases basically,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I'll
Hmm.
just write this equation somewhere else. Earning is greater than expense, then runway increases.
Hmm.
So what do we want? We want the runway. See here, we want the runway graph to be ascending.
Right.
We want the expense graph to be flatlining or at
Correct.
increasing only at the rate of expense, basically, the rate
Right.
of inflation rather.
Inflation. Correct. Huh.
And we want the earnings graph to be increasing even further, basically.
Correct.
So if you see, runway and earnings have very deep correlation with each other, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what do poor people think? They will reduce the expense to zero and hence they will become rich or stay rich.
Right. Right.
But then
Right.
you can't reduce the expense below zero, na?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's the problem here.
Right.
Understood?
Right.
So one correct way to think is I will burn the runway and earn even higher than what I burnt.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's one way to think. But this obviously involves risk. What if you don't earn higher, basically?
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's why 99% startups fail because already things are quite efficient in the human ecosystem. So if you are going to
Hmm.
deliver a new product or service, it has to
Hmm.
be significantly better because
Huh.
progress happens at the boundaries only, right? So
Right. Right.
let's say a new candy company has to be significantly better as a brand than the earlier candy company. A new
Correct.
shoe
Correct.
company has to be significantly better. A new car
Correct.
company or a new microservices company, new fitness company has to be, new education company has to be significantly better than what's happening in
Correct.
terms of
Correct.
branding, in terms of marketing, in terms of
Correct.
management, in terms of cost of production, in terms of product market fit,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
in
Hmm.
terms of management, in terms of
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm. Yeah.
The new has to be significantly better in order to like push the market around and make way,
Right. Right.
because we still lived in isolated, segmented, fractionated human realities, right? Basically, so ideally
Hmm.
speaking, the entire education sector should be one, right?
Correct. Correct.
And all should be contributing towards the students' progress, yes or no?
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
sadly speaking, 90% effort of the education sector also goes in infighting amongst each other,
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
and this is true for all sectors
All
actually.
sectors. Yeah.
All sectors. So 90% goes in cancelling each other out basically for political parties, etc. So if you remember that dipole, magnetic dipole analogy, basically
Hmm. Hmm.
humans are like they are opposite dipoles. You can say they are kind of like diamagnetic, paramagnetic substances rather
Hmm.
than ferro who are aligned in one direction basically.
Right, right, yeah,
So if some external threat comes, then it's like that strong externally applied magnetic field that aligns the people momentarily. For example, if India-Pakistan war will be there, then all Indians will be united, basically.
correct, correct, yeah,
If there is a cricket match, then all Indians will be united, for example. Yeah.
right,
So this
right,
in-group loyalty and in-group fealty is what I think the author's name is Paul Bloom. He talks about this in his book called Against Empathy.
acha, okay,
So people don't have global empathy, they have local empathy. That's the point over here, basically.
hmm.
They have local empathy and they have global apathy, you can say. People
Okay.
usually don't care about what's happening globally.
Right,
And some people have long term visions across space and time, and they can have global empathy, but then they are not very effective because other people are not having global empathy. You
hmm.
can
Right,
something like that. All right.
right, right,
Okay. So this is like a very important graph and another concept that we documented, which is runway versus time. So
right,
runway versus time documents what earnings, it documents the runway and it documents the expenses basically.
yeah,
So
yeah,
by earnings I actually mean this value. This is the earning, like what
ah,
earnings are drawn above runway basically.
correct, yeah,
And expenses means actually from zero to this value basically.
yeah,
And this is the runway. Runway means
correct,
savings.
correct,
You can
yeah,
replace runway with savings also,
hmm.
basically.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yes. Okay. Now, when the runway is significantly higher, multifolds, it is in multifolds of your uh, like time wise, how much you are spending into the
right,
number of months you have left on Earth, basically. Then
right,
you are what we can call as A-lit. A-lit means above linear in time, basically.
okay,
Again, I will repeat.
okay,
The English word alit also makes sense. Alit means like ablaze or something like that.
right, right,
Lit up
yeah,
basically, something like
right,
that. So
right,
alit here I am saying alit means above linear in.
okay, okay, hmm,
So what I am saying is if let's say a person has 50 years to live and 12 months. So 50 years into 12 months, right?
hmm.
600 months they
600
have to live
months,
and their monthly expense is X. So if they have already 600X stored,
right,
even in low risk investments basically, then they are
hmm.
above lit. Now they don't have to work linearly in time.
Correct, correct,
So now they can work towards their passion projects and transcendence and self-actualization and things like that, basically.
right, right,
If they are of the saving mindset or the retirement mindset, if they are of the
right,
business mindset, then they will be like, I will burn, let's say I have
uh,
600X. So now I'm fighting very far away from my chest and not close to my chest, right?
correct,
Because
correct,
every human psychology depends upon the runway. Are you understanding this? Like people don't talk
hmm.
about it at all,
Hmm.
actually.
Hmm.
So
Right.
if you have got 5x runway, so everybody should calculate how many months they have to live, basically.
Hmm.
And they should calculate what is their runway. And they should,
Right.
without even discussing with each other, they should just say that how much it is. Is it 2x? Is it 1x?
Hmm.
You like I heard some surprising statistics that for most of the US population, it
Right.
was I think 1x basically. So if
Oh,
the
yeah,
next
I even
paycheck
have heard
doesn't
of.
come, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And that's like 80-85% of the people, some ridiculously high number like that, basically.
Right.
So if the next paycheck doesn't come in, then they don't know what to do.
Right.
Then they'll have to go back to the credit cards and borrow
Hmm.
money. So that
Hmm.
means minus 1x your runways. That means.
Yeah.
So the runway should like okay, runway is also a function of age. So if you are just going to graduate from university, maybe your runway can be X or 2x or something like that. After 10 years, so a runway should generally be like this basically. So you have got roughly 40 years to work, 20 to 60, or even you
Right.
can say 70, 50 years to work, let us say. Okay.
Right. Huh.
For active proper
Correct.
work, some people can work
Right.
at 80, 90 years of age also, but 20 to 70, if this much amount of work is there basically in a human being,
Hmm.
then runway I'm just plotting down what it kind of should be basically. So here if it is X, then after 10 years don't you think it should at least be 10x or 12x basically, which
Hmm.
is at age 30 basically. This is like the minimum requirement, right?
Right. Right.
So at age 40, age 50. So at age 40, According to me, it should, because now you have got less amount of days to work also, na. So your runway should be, if whatever
Correct,
are the
correct.
number of months you have got left to work, etc. So it should not be like, okay, only 22x or 24x. No, it should be 30x.
Hmm.
At age 50, it should not be like only 18x should be added. No, it should more be like 80x.
Right, right.
80x is barely how much? 6 years. So don't you think you at age
Right.
50 we should have money saved for the next 6 years of our life? That is
Hmm.
obviously true, right?
Correct,
Think about
correct. Yeah, yeah.
it. At 60x, maybe it should be 120x at 60 years of age. And
Right.
at 70 years of age, maybe it should be 200x,
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm.
Even though we don't have 200 months to live, basically, but still, I am saying,
We
okay,
might,
now,
huh?
we might or not, but even if we don't, then we are going to pass on something, right, to the
Right,
world.
right, right.
In,
Huh.
in terms of our own progeny or our own kids, or in
Hmm.
terms of the books or the art that we create, like the art and literature that we create, basically, and in
Right,
terms of values and ethos, including these videos, these like whatever we are documenting right now in video format, this will also be passed on, right,
right. Yeah.
to the subsequent and further generations. Correct.
Hmm.
So the idea is this, that runway gives us or tells us or makes us document the momentum with which we are throwing this idea set into the future, basically, or into the project.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you can say that, okay, at age 100, let us say at age 100, you have a 1000x runway,
Okay.
and you are going to, let's say, die in X, matlab in 1 month you are going to die. So you are almost 1000x, or you have 1001x in 1 month you are going to die. So you are left with 1000x runway. Okay?
Right, right.
So you can now do one thing, that you can project this knowledge or your ethos or knowledge either in the form of giving that runway to some heir or progeny, or like putting it into a trust fund that will like do good for the world, etc. Now we
Hmm.
will not go into the debate of trust funds also, or like charities are also not that effective. So that is a separate topic. We'll talk about
Right,
that later separately, basically.
right,
Okay.
right.
So, or you can, if you think that charities are not effective, you can just do digital marketing on the content that you have generated, and you can just splash
Hmm.
the content all across the place with
Right,
1000x runway, basically.
right.
So
Yeah.
your ethos will at least percolate to however many people they will percolate to, right? Basically.
Hmm.
And many
Hmm.
rich people do this propaganda and things like that, basically, right? So
Right,
if your ethos are correct for the world, then it is a crime not to propagate them. Think.
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
So this is something about runway. Now,
Right.
if you are actually working and earning and saving and working and earning and saving and not developing assets, then obviously that is exactly what is called as lit, right? Lit, linear in time behavior.
Anytime. Correct, correct.
And then you are working and not even making minimum wage or something like that, living in poverty, then that is called as sublit.
Hmm. Right,
So every human being has their net kind of per hour income set in their mind. So
right.
let's say they exceed that, then that is kind of a lit. If they
Hmm.
kind of meet that, then that is kind of lit, basically. And
Right,
if
right,
they can't even meet that and are significantly below or even slightly below, that is called as sublit. So like
right,
I'm just defining some nomenclature here so that like I'll talk about it in the future. And most businesses end up being lit or sublit, basically. If the business
okay.
can reach a lit level, then it is better, because then the boss's tantrums you don't have to listen to, basically, right? You can
Right,
independently work and reach at least the lit level, basically, that way.
right, right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that so that is one thing. So leverage and delegation. So this was about leverage. So
Hmm.
obviously leverage is going to make your life easier, right? Generally
Right.
speaking.
Yeah.
So we are talking about general effectiveness today. The topic of the conversation is like general effectiveness. Correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now leverage and delegation means, obviously, like for example, I can't cook, so I delegate the cooking activity to somebody who can cook, basically, and I
Correct,
pay them at market rate or above the market rate, basically, for
correct,
example. So this
correct.
is like delegation. We don't need to talk much about in terms of effectiveness. So I'll just mention what these things are. This is the emoti graph. This is the emoti graph. This is the you can say daily allocation of time. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
time allocation,
Hmm.
or you can call this as activity time graph, right? Activity time.
Right.
And this
Right.
is the net worth, net social capital. Yeah. social capital, etc., versus time graph, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So here, what is happening is some dopaminergic activity is okay over here, basically. So because of some dopaminergic activity, now I'm going to explain these two concepts, right? Already I explained that because of that dopaminergic activity, your active effort will become twice as effective.
Right.
So the efficacy or effectiveness of the active effort goes up basically because of some dopaminergic activity.
Correct.
So, so this is something that I call as, yeah, okay, just the effectiveness because of some slight amount of dopaminergic activity. But then
Right.
there is something that we can call as also the contrast principle. Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what is the meaning of the contrast principle? Let me explain this. Okay. Let's say, let me take a nice round number. Let's say a person has 10 hours to work.
Okay.
In a day, let's say a person has 10 hours to work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the person may argue to themselves like this that, okay, if I don't work for 10 hours, I can potentially work for 3 hours, and 7 hours I can just chill on Netflix and watch some movie or watch some YouTube video and relax.
Right.
Entertainment, the so-called entertainment that the world is addicted to, basically, right?
Right. Right.
So, what is the aim of a human life? To maximize utility and in terms of fulfillment, contentment, eudaimonia, basically, right? That is the aim. So, let's say he does only 3 hours of work and let's say 7 hours of chilling. Let me draw it like this: 3 hours of work, let's say the person does,
Yeah. Okay.
and the person goes ahead and does 7 hours of chilling.
Hmm.
So what can we say? Have they maximized utility? Most likely not, because they
Mm-hmm.
lost the opportunity cost of having worked more and attained more in life, correct?
Correct.
They lost that opportunity cost, correct?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, I'll correlate this back to the original problem statement, one of the original problem statements that we were looking for. For the lucky, what are they losing? So they are losing a lot of opportunity cost for sure.
Right. Right.
Like, for example, if Shah Rukh Khan has X amount of wealth right now, he could
Hmm.
potentially have had maybe 1000x or something like that. He does not have that because he is not a businessman.
Hmm. Okay.
He's
Right.
again a late person only. Yeah? He's kind of a linear in time person with high per hour rates, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Correct. Correct. Hmm.
So now he also has to involve himself in dopaminergic and like wrong activities like marketing any company without checking authenticity or credentials, etc. Because of
Mm-hmm.
which his own authenticity and credentials will go down. So
Right.
because of this, he will not have the satisfaction of passing on a legacy, let us say,
Hmm.
compared to otherwise, basically.
Right. 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 Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 7 hours of dopaminism or even just resting, basically, even if let's say dopaminism is not there, Netflix dopaminism is not there. Okay. Even if the person is resting, then still 7 hours means they are incurring opportunity cost, basically. Right.
Right. Right.
Now let's kind of take another example. Let us say that they are working for 10 hours. Then what are they missing? Let's say they are working for 10. Yeah, okay, this is dopa. This is dopa. And this is, let's say, work. This is work. Okay. So let's
Hmm.
say they are working for 10 hours out of 10 waking hours, basically.
Right.
And they are not doing any kind of dopa or even rest activity. Then here what is missing? Or
They're
what is
missing the
wrong,
pleasure.
basically?
They're missing the dopamine, like that motivation, which can
Yeah.
increase the efficiency. So,
We can increase the efficiency and
it's
make that 10 hours of work
20
effectively
hours.
speaking, 20 hours or 18 hours or
Right.
something higher like
Right.
that, right?
Right. Right.
Okay. So basically what we are trying to say is why I have taken 10 hours is because rest of the time I am assuming is for socializing, rest, biological activities, basically,
Right.
food,
Okay. Okay.
etc.
Right.
So out of 24 hours, I am just taking 10 hours basically, which is like even if we take a normal person, they do have 10 hours to work, basically. Think
Hmm.
about it.
Right.
In one day, especially now that most people don't have to travel, or people have the choice to choose a career where they don't have to travel, basically, for
Hmm.
example.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So
Right.
let's look at this. So if they are doing 10 hours like this, then this is the problem. So we are not here including the biological or rest or well-being oriented activities here, basically.
Right. Right.
So we are now just going to look at only, for simplicity, only work versus dopaminism here. So yeah, so basically here also you can see lack of delegation reduced, there was a small sink in your, delta function sink in your emoji graph right now, because you're kind of disturbed from a flow state or something that you are
Right.
doing productive, basically, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So like if you carefully observe, this emoji graph is a very powerful concept, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
why did it happen? Because you did not have delegation available right now.
Right. Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Like how am I able to sit? Basically because I have delegation available basically right now.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
I don't have to do this like manual labor activities like opening the door, etc., which are
Correct.
important but not very productive. You will agree, basically.
Correct.
Like
Correct. Correct.
it is not necessary that you should do it. I mean to say,
Correct. Correct.
some automation is not there. Basically, that's why
Mm.
that thing happened. Okay,
Yeah.
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 So let's like this. This was example one. This is example two. Let us say. Let's
Mm.
take the
Mm.
example three. Okay. Now let's try to do this. Let's try. Okay. In example one, like let's try to calculate the utility of example one. That's what I want to do as an exercise. Let's try to
Okay.
calculate the utility that the person will extract in example one. Okay. So
Hmm.
let's say dopa utility is there. Let's call it as D. So 7D. Can you say that 7D?
70.
And then
Yeah.
3 hours of work utility is there. So 3W. So
3W.
can I say that the net utility is 7D plus 3W?
Yeah. Okay. But
Yes,
how are you
but
going
it
to
is
define?
but
Huh.
but it is not. Okay,
Okay.
because of the phenomena of diminishing marginal utility.
Okay.
So
Makes sense. Right. Yeah.
the first 2 hours of Netflix are very pleasing, but the hour number
Right.
2 to 7 are not that pleasing. So
Right. Right.
it's more like 3D or 2D basically 2D. Okay, especially
Uh-huh.
if the person is addict and doing this across days basically,
Right. Right.
then it is more like 2D. And since they are now not supercharged because they are not loving their work,
Hmm.
so their 3W is also not 3W. It's more like they sat for 3 hours but worked only effectively for 1 hour.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is what happens. Like, this is the fuck up that happens with utility basically.
Right. Yeah.
Now let's look at 10 hours basically. In 10 hours, their utility, I would say, in 10 hours is approximately 7W,
Hmm.
or approximately you can say 8W basically.
8W or something. Right.
Okay. Why? Because they were not supercharged with some reward mechanism or some or flow state or something like that, basically. Right?
Right. Right.
Or you can say with a mission or something like that. They were just doing it robotically and things like that. Okay.
Hmm.
Now let's look at example three. Now in example three, if they do, let's say 9 hours of work
Okay.
and 1 hour of dopa.
Hmm.
Okay. Now this is where that resonance type higher utility effects start coming into play, basically, right?
Right. Right.
So So the utility here in example three, the utility will be, let us say, 9 hours of work they were able to do diligently because they knew that they were going to be rewarded later. Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
that 9 hours they did super awesome in a very super awesome manner by visualizing that, okay, some amount of future positivity is there because of that. Okay. So it's more like 18
Hmm.
W.
W.
Yeah, 18W. No, here I should actually draw dopa over here. No? So just a second, I'll just change the drawing.
अच्छा डोप on the left. हाँ ठीक है.
Dopa on the left.
Right.
So it's like one dopa
Right.
and 9 hours of the 9 hours work. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like 18W because of this, 18W. And because of one dopa, guess what? Because of one dopa, now they are going to get 3D or 4D of activity in their brain. Now I'll explain why. Because of the concept of savoring and relishment.
Okay. Okay.
Because they know that dopa is so less, they will be
Ah.
savoring it more. Think about it. So
Right.
imagine a scenario wherein assuming that let's say a person likes to eat mango. Imagine let's say for example you like to eat mango. Let's assume that. Okay, I think this is a correct assumption. So
Yeah.
let's assume that you are eating mango. Now you are being mindful and present in that moment and savoring and relishing the
Mhm.
taste of mango or sugar or ice cream or something like that.
Right.
Okay. And you know that this is not going to cause harm, but it's actually going to cause benefit. So there is what we can say is guilt-free eating of mango, basically.
Okay.
As opposed to guilty eating of mango, guilty wherein which
Right.
we overeat sugar, etc., and later feel
Mhm.
bad that okay, we
Right.
have done something wrong with respect to
Right.
productivity and efficiency. So
Right. Correct.
because of that, you are going to savor it more. So some phenomena
Hmm.
like the contrast principle and savoring, this is what
Hmm.
comes into play here.
Right.
So I'll explain, like I'll write it down. So
Hmm.
contrast principle. means you are like coming from a desert. Like I'll give you a very simple example. If you have walked 20 miles in a desert, then one bottle of water, is it not more pleasurable than just randomly drinking one bottle of water?
I mean, obviously, when you come from the desert, it'll be much more pleasurable.
Correct, correct. So this is
Right.
what is happening. You are coming from the desert, right, of working 9 hours. There also you are enjoying because you
Yeah.
have now purpose there. Yeah, yeah. So here I'm talking about the contrast principle and savoring and relishment of experiences, basically.
Right. Right.
So because of relishment, you will actually end up getting more amount of pleasure
Correct. Yeah.
compared to what you should in a linear in time manner. And now
Hmm.
this can even be 1x more, let us say, or 2x more if you are integrated living, basically. Think about it. So if you are
Hmm.
working as well as spending time with your social people, means you are working only with your social or group of friends, then work
Right.
becomes like pleasurable, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So now you can actually imply that if this now is combined with like integrated living,
Hmm.
and even let's say you use other principles of productive success like automation using habits,
Hmm. Hmm.
okay, and then delegation so that your graph does not sink again and again, basically.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So when you use a combined set of like, and also do the min max thing, like definitive rule based min max thing, you have leverage and delegation, you have ergonomics, so you have got proper spaces where you can work. That's why
Right.
companies like Google focus upon the office space and things like that, right?
Right. Right.
they,
Right.
they try to give their employees everything like integrated living,
Correct.
automation, everything they try to give it, basically.
Right. Right.
Whoever utilizes that, okay.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
with all of this integrated living and everything, your satiation is also high. So
Hmm.
ultimately you are going to derive utility that is approximately proportional to more like 22, and with integrated
Hmm.
living, automation, etc., okay, it can approximately be even
Right.
30 also sometimes later.
Right. Right.
So now let's look at example one. When you did 7 hours of Netflix, you derived some utility, which is 3.
Hmm.
Okay. But
Yeah.
with this kind of methodology, you derived 30. So
30.
there is
Right.
this concept of resonance in physics, right?
Yeah.
So in resonance, what happens if you are like the forced frequency or the frequency of the driving force is very different from the frequency of the oscillating system, then that
Hmm.
means that like the oscillating system may stop oscillating.
Correct.
But if the frequency, literal frequency of the driving force is the same as the frequency of the oscillating system, then the oscillating system oscillates with higher amplitude. It's like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So interference, constructive interference, destructive interference, resonance, all these things play a part. For example, if a husband and wife are there and their frequencies are matching, let us say, okay. Now
Hmm.
this is only this is very woo woo. This sounds very woo woo, but it's
Right.
actually there is some substance to what I'm going to say. If their frequencies and energies are matching and they are understanding each other, it's like work is getting divided into half and pleasure of working is getting doubled, basically.
Hmm.
So
Right.
4x effect is there, basically, if they are
Right.
actually vibing a lot with each other's energy.
Right. Yeah.
And as opposed to that, if they are trying to leech value from each other, see what is
Hmm.
the meaning of vibing? Like usually, a woman wants love and a husband wants respect, basically. So vibing
Right.
means exchanging whatever is exact commodity to be exchanged, basically.
Right.
But
Right.
if let us say like she is doing her own thing, he is doing her own thing, then it can be either neutral or it can even be destructive instead of
Hmm.
being constructive as a
Right.
marriage situation. So
Right.
in this manner, if somebody is thinking that they have worked for 3 hours and watched Netflix for 7 hours, then their utility that they derived out of that day is only 3.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is the less effective method of living. This is like
Correct.
the moderate or mediocre method of living, wherein you are working a lot, but you are not having that edge mentality or smart leverage mentality, basically.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And here, this 9 hours of work is also pleasurable because it is going to be leveraged work and effectiveness based work, not
Right.
degree filled work. Basically, it's going to be
Right.
creative work. Basically,
Yeah.
not repetition oriented work, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you are getting purpose and supercharging based upon purpose because of this also, and because
Hmm.
of the contrast principle. Okay, like
Hmm.
you are coming out of the desert and then enjoying a bottle of water, right? Because of the
Correct.
contrast principle and savoring and relishment of that bottle of water, you are going to be able to enjoy higher amount of utility this can be increased with integrated living and automation, basically, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I generally have this tendency of recommending that you leave aside your sleeping hours and you leave aside your
Hmm.
biological requirement hours.
Right.
Then you should do 95/5 if you can. Otherwise, at least 90/10
Right. Right. Yeah.
with respect to your money as well as time as well as energy, basically, right?
Right. Right.
So given that this is true, then generally the recommended rule of thumb is 211 317. Okay. So this is
Okay.
7 is for sleep.
Hmm.
One is like a buffer thing for mindfulness, meditation,
Right.
gratitude, savoring, gratitude practices, etc. This is for
Right.
exercise. Yeah. And then
Hmm.
11 is for work. And
Hmm.
3 is for, you can say, socializing
Right. Right.
slash hobbies.
Right.
So this is like a, see, because everything has to boil down to and come down to a schedule that we can recommend, right? Basically.
Correct. Correct.
So
Yeah.
this is like a rule of thumb schedule, basically. All right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you look at days, now we did this particular graph we did with respect to day, right? This is like a
Hmm.
day.
Hmm.
This is for a day. Now, if you look at for a week, okay, here only. In fact, I'll try to draw here only with respect to, no, not here, but on the next page. Okay. So
Okay.
if I look at this with respect to a week, then maybe it will look like someday you went hard, then on some day you went low, hard, low. Let's say this can
Hmm.
be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Got it, no?
Yeah.
Friday, and then Saturday you went slightly low, and then Sunday you rested completely.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
So with respect to a week, it will look like this. So kind
Yeah.
of what's happening in a day kind of mimics what's happening in the week, if you see.
Hmm.
So
Correct. Correct.
this is what kind of happened in one day, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So this is now kind of mimicking what's happening in the week.
In the
And then in
week.
the month, you can take one weekend off or something like that, basically.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And then in one 6 month period, you can take 1 week off, something like that.
Ah.
And in
Yeah.
1 year period, maybe you can take 2 weeks off,
Hmm.
something like that, basically. So
Right.
1 week per 6 months or 2 weeks per 1 year, basically, like that.
Okay.
Because if
Okay.
you don't do that, then you will
Hmm.
not be supercharging your system with
Hmm.
rejuvenation.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
So this is what is called as automation of holidays, basically. So I recommend.
Right.
So basically, this also depends towards the later end of life. It will be more. But let's say
Right.
somebody from age 20 to age 40. Let's say I recommend basically 1 week per 6 months off,
Okay. Okay. Right. Right.
6 months off, and 4 days per month off additional.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Because what the office is giving us as holiday, it's irrelevant, na? Because we can work at any point in time on our side hustle, business, etc. Anything,
Correct.
everything, right?
Correct. Correct.
So if you are not following this, then that means that you are overexerting yourself, and then you might be suffering burnout and things like that, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is kind of has to be automated, basically. And from
Right.
and from age 40 to 60,
Hmm.
yeah, age 40 to 50, you can say, you can make this 4 days a month as, let's say, 5 days a month, or if you can hold it at four, then good, 4 days a month. And then
Right.
instead of 1 week in 6 months, then now you can have kind of 2 weeks in 6 months.
Right.
2 weeks
Right.
or 1.5 weeks, let's say 1.5 weeks in 6 months.
Hmm.
And then from age 50 to 60, you can gradually increase, right?
Right. Yeah.
Age 50 to 60, this can be now 6 days or even 8 days a month. So you are taking proper weekends off, for example.
Right.
And
Right.
instead of 1.5, you can have 2 weeks per 6 months,
Hmm.
something like that, basically.
Right.
But if you are loving your work, then even there are people who would even prefer this in age 50 to 60 also.
Hmm. Right.
So this happens when they are finding flow and love in their work itself, and their integrated life is only so great that going on vacation is going to make them miss out on productivity and utility, basically.
Right. Right.
But less than this, less than 4 days a month, I have tried this, basically. And
Acha.
okay, means like I have tried even continuously working for 100 days and things like that. But as a matter of experiment, but less than 4 days a month is inefficient, basically, is what I
Hmm.
would say.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Okay. But having said this, there are now I'm going to define another thing with respect to productivity. There are
Hmm.
going to be deprivation based phases. they are going to be what I call as plateau phases, and there are going to be sprint or climb phases, basically. Sprint
Right.
climb.
Okay. Okay.
Sprint climb.
Hmm.
So whatever we have said is more or less valid for the plateau phase, basically. Whatever we
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
said. In the
Right.
deprivation phase, you need to work as much as you need to in order to stay away from deprivation and get away from deprivation, basically.
Right.
In the sprint phase also you need to, because otherwise you will face opportunity cost, basically.
Correct. Correct.
So for
Yeah.
example, tomorrow is the exam and today you are measuring time. Okay, I will work only for 8 hours today, etc.,
Right.
etc. No, you need to work in order to achieve what is called as MRP or MRE. MRP,
Hmm.
or in chemistry it is called as activation energy.
Okay. Okay.
So you need to kind of work as much as you can in order to get the result, basically. You
Right.
can.
Right. Right.
So obviously, taking care of your health and long-term sustainability. Let's say tomorrow is the exam, you can't afford to work only 1 2 hours today, especially if you have not studied earlier.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that is like a sprint slash climb phase, right?
Right.
So in high intensity interval training, it is the high intensity period, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
High intensity period. MRP means minimum requisite power, or MRE means minimum requisite energy.
Right. Right.
So you have to achieve MRP or MRE, right? Basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So this is the high intensity period.
Right.
And similarly, in deprivation also you need to work in high intensity only. So in
Right.
these two phases, so you have to identify intensity periods or phases as you move through life.
Right.
So let's say if a person wants to find a job and they don't have a job, then that is a supposed high intensity period, because if they are not still
Hmm.
finding it, then they are losing out on opportunity.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And other efficiency techniques as well as rest, relaxation, and even vacation techniques are applicable mainly for the plateau period, wherein which
Right.
in the plateau period we mainly worry about sustainability.
Right. Right.
In deprivation we worry about getting away from deprivation, right?
Right. Right.
So it's like, for example, let's say a soldier is trapped in enemy territory, behind enemy lines, basically. All right,
Hmm.
and then
Right.
those people are chasing the soldier, and the soldier can't be like, "Oh, today I will run only 8 miles out of 10 miles for optimization." It can't be like that. He has to
Right.
hit MRP, and what is the MRP? Or like minimum requisite energy? That is the energy that is required for him to get back to his own base or to his own country,
Correct.
etc.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
So otherwise, there is huge opportunity cost. Like otherwise, he might like suffer
Definitely.
death, torture, capture, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So there he has to be high intensity efficiently as much as possible.
Right.
So
Right.
another example was that Phidippides, who had to travel from I think Greek to Athens or vice versa, something like that, in order to deliver the message that we have won the war, don't
Oh,
surrender.
right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So because of whom the Olympic Games got named, na? Basically
Yeah.
the Olympic Games started, the long distance marathon running started as a sport. So if he did not do it, then he wouldn't have hit the MRP or MRE. So he wouldn't
Hmm.
have hit the activity. So this happens with startups basically, right?
Right.
So
Right.
they don't have MRP or MRE, they hence run dry. Because if you think about it, theoretically, no startup should fail because they can infinitely iterate and get into a product market fit, right?
Correct. Correct.
So they don't fail, they run out of cash or they run out of energy
Hmm.
basically. Think.
Hmm. Right.
So
Right.
basically they run out of runway in short.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That is what happens with startups basically.
Right. Right.
Because
Yeah.
see, the challenges are too many, right? They are facing internal mutiny because some employees will not completely agree, adhere, and they will not be aligned, basically, right? They are
Hmm.
facing things like taxation and government policies externally,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they are facing extreme competitive pressure, basically.
Right.
Think. By the way, incidentally, I will give a model of success for startups here also, basically, right?
Okay.
So you can say that this is a flag. Matlab, after going into the complex details of the theory, I try to simplify things.
Right.
So this is what we can call as the brand. Okay.
Okay.
So this the flag pole is
Hmm.
what we can call as the runway,
Runway. Okay. Okay.
runway or
Hmm.
saving, and the post you can say is like
Hmm.
the community or tribe associated with that startup, basically, right?
Okay.
So now
Okay.
the synergy principle says that okay, if the brand is good enough, then they will acquire customers sales in order to generate runway, because only for customer sales further investors are going to invest in them.
Right. Right.
or banks are going to give them debt and loan to expand themselves. And
Correct.
because of customer sales, they'll directly acquire runway as well, basically, right?
Right. Right.
So from this runway, because of this runway, they'll be able to hire people and deploy technology. So they'll be able to increase their tribe. Now this
Right.
tribe will in turn increase the brand value,
Right.
because of which they will acquire runway, because of which they will increase their commune or community or
Right.
tribe, basically. So this
Right.
is the, you can say, the positive upward spiral, you can say,
Right. Right.
or the virtuous cycle with respect to the
Hmm.
startup.
Hmm.
This is the virtuous cycle with respect to the startup.
Right.
So
Right.
where do they fail? Now, in order to develop brand, now they need to, kind of diminish their runway to start with.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, like for example, let's say they are generating content. So they need to pay to content creators, video editors, etc., etc., right? But
Yeah.
if that content doesn't lead into runway increase,
Hmm.
then they wouldn't be able to make their processes and systems more and more efficient, and this
Right.
wouldn't lead to higher brand, basically. Okay,
Right.
so on and so forth. So another model is like this: brand.
Hmm.
Okay, then you have got this commune. Commune is like the people or humans associated with the startup,
Right. Right.
right? Including all HR processes, all internal processes, etc.
Hmm.
And then you have got product market fit. So they can continue, and then you have got runway.
Okay.
So they are continuously burning runway in order to increase brand, commune, and product market fit, basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
So one virtuous cycle is like this: like runway is there. So runway is there, because of that commune is there. Commune is there, product
Right.
market fit is there. So advertisement is there, brand is there. Brand is there, increases runway, so on and so forth.
Right. Right.
So this resonance or synergy or flywheel type of effects, the Lollapalooza type of resonance type of effects, they are
Hmm.
very important, like with respect to startups
Hmm.
or even with respect to individuals. So with respect to individuals in personal efficacy, what are we seeing basically? We are seeing that max efficiency is happening. Okay, where did we write that? Those equations, yeah, here. Max
Hmm.
efficiency is happening in this kind of a scenario,
Right.
wherein which for active hours, apart from biological time, social time, obligations time, etc., because there are some biological and social obligations that the individual has to go through, right? So
Right.
apart from that, 9 hours or 9.5 hours of work and half an hour of dopaminism is actually bringing in maximum amount of utility.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
Now, some people will wonder that, okay, Zenith, like if you are saying that 9 hours of work, then when will we enjoy Netflix? So the idea is that by not enjoying Netflix, you are going to create properties in the future because of your hard work. So you decide what you want, properties or
Right.
some diminishing marginal utility based Netflix, basically.
Right. Right. Correct.
And there also you are not missing out on Netflix, because of watching it for only half an hour or 1 hour, basically, and
Hmm.
watching it on your weekends off and on your vacations, basically, while traveling,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
So by watching it like that, you are going to still get contrast principle and savoring based happiness out of Netflix as well, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Correct.
then you choose to have only that much happiness. You have control, impulse control. You choose to have only that much happiness from dopa activities like Netflix, like ice cream, etc., sugar,
Hmm.
etc., alcohol, etc. And then for 9 hours out of 10 hours or 9.5 hours, you choose to enjoy working. So that is
Hmm.
the vocabulary that we have to use. Because now that you love your work so much, because your work is taking you closer and closer to max utility deriving from the opportunity of life that you got, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you learn to love your work. You did not choose the work that you love.
Hmm.
You
Correct.
learn to love your work because it is giving you what you want in life.
Yeah.
So you learn to love your work, and hence now you enjoy working because that work is going to maximize your utility in life, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is like the correct principle to have in general.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Right. So another thing is there over here. Like I told you, there are phases of life, right?
Hmm.
So, so already I have mentioned it over here. Yeah. So these
Yeah.
are the phases. So there might be some phase where high intensity sprinting is required. So
Hmm.
there we can't say that I will work only a measured amount of 9 hours, basically.
Hmm. Correct.
So for example, if somebody is changing jobs, or changing career tracks, or somebody is working in order to get through an entrance exam, or if somebody is coming back to the job market, or somebody is trying to create the YouTube channel for the first time in their lives.
Right.
So these are phases where sprinting and climbing is very important basically.
Yeah.
Till the time you, like, go through the J part of the curve and reach the S plateau of the curve basically.
Hmm.
Because everything is going to be like, and this deprivation plateau high intensity also matches this. Can you see this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything is correlated. Everything is
Yeah.
correlated basically. It also matches the general JS curve.
Hmm.
So sometimes you need to suffer voluntarily in order to reach higher amount of utility. And
Right.
again, one thing that confuses, like, people also consult me about this. Now, so one thing that confuses a lot of people is like, my happiness is suffering if I am suffering in a job or something like that. No, but you are getting meaning out of it, right? You are getting utility out of it. You are
Hmm.
getting what we can call as wholeness out of it, basically.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
So let your happiness suffer. So do you still want to be happy if your sibling or loved one or parent dies? On that day, do you want to be happy?
Hmm.
So that means you are not even a human being, like you are becoming like a robot or a sedated person basically, like,
Right. Right.
there is this dystopian future realities that some people talk about, like the company Meta was trying to, via Oculus they were trying to put everybody into that dystopian reality wherein which people will always be in a holographic universe or connected
Right.
metaverse kind of a thing. Basically they will just
Right.
put holograms and like this, and there are some movies in which this is depicted, right, typically,
Right. Ha.
wherein which people are just connected to their Oculus or their metaverse kits, you can say, and they are
Right.
just
Yeah.
living in, vans basically in the
Uh,
real world, and they are just connected in the metaverse with each other basically.
yeah.
So like that kind of a
Hmm.
thing. So you can say that this is extreme level of sedation.
Hmm. Hmm.
So as human beings, we need to choose. Like, sedation means what? You are going into that extremely passive and dormant, docile state, right?
Yeah.
So what did you choose to do with your gift of life? That
Hmm.
is the choice over here, right? What was chosen by you? What did you choose to do with your gift of life?
Yeah.
Did you choose to make the most out of it in the sense of maximizing utility, in the sense of maximizing fulfillment and eudaimonia, compared to just maximizing dopaminergic happiness and dopaminism based pleasures?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that is the question that we need to kind of ask ourselves. Okay.
Right.
Now,
Right.
coming back to the original question, what are the lucky rich kids or people
Right.
missing basically?
Missing out on. Huh.
This was one of the original questions that we were trying
Yeah.
to answer. So
Yeah.
they are definitely missing the opportunity cost of deriving so much utility. Can we say?
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. True. True.
they are definitely missing the opportunity cost basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the argumentative part of the mind might say that, okay, they are missing out on that opportunity cost, for sure it is true, but what about the fact that they were a lazy person, so they did not even deserve what they got in life. Okay, they did
Okay.
not get 1000x, but they got 100x, right? And they did
Right.
they deserved only x, or they deserved even minus 10x basically because they were
Right.
evil.
Right.
So
Right.
what
Okay.
about the fact that they deserved minus 10x but they got 100x? Okay,
Hmm.
then I would say to that part of the mind, welcome, my friend. You are like entering the realm of the unfairness based real sociological situations that have happened and taken place on Earth, basically.
Right. Right.
So, this is something that is beyond our control, we can say.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, some unfair people will cheat, steal, lie. They will cheat, they will steal, they will lie, and they will get more utility compared to what they should have gotten.
Hmm.
And they are the morally corrupt ones.
Right.
According to biblical vocabulary, they are like the agents of Satan, basically, you can say,
Right. Right.
or
Right.
satanic or evil people. So as
Right.
to say, right?
Right.
So, or evil activities. I usually don't classify things as people. I usually classify activities rather than people, because people may
I get
change.
you.
Activity can be defined basically. Like, okay,
Makes sense.
this,
Right. Right.
this activity and this intention was good, bad for humanity, so on and so forth. Like, we can't say that a person is good for humanity or bad unless we analyze the entire lifetime of that person,
Right.
basically,
Right. Right.
which is usually very difficult to do, generally
Right.
speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a person's lifetime involves a lot many things. Like, we will
Hmm.
at least require some 1,000 hours to analyze properly with
Right.
microcombing a person's lifetime, basically. And
Right.
usually, nobody has 1,000 hours to analyze one single individual, basically, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So then we have to accept the unfair nature of the human existence on planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
Now the question is this: because some people are lucky and unfair and morally corrupt, are
Mhm.
you going to do stay in your maximally moral lane, or are you going to go towards the evil side or the
Mhm.
dopaminergic side? Okay, because of comparisonitis that was induced in you. That's the question.
Mhm. Right.
This is the question.
Right.
So to that, I have only one answer, that by staying in the moral lane, basically, you gain in the moral plane.
Mm.
And if somebody's moral plane is not so strong that they think that rationally or subconsciously they think that going in the dopaminergic plane and being immoral is going to maximize utility, or they subconsciously think it, or just because of the drift of the tide of the time they think this, basically
Mm. Uh,
because of just sheep mentality, herd mentality, they think
right.
this. Then
Right.
that is an unfortunate circumstance, because the truth is staying in the moral plane gives you a lot of courage, it gives you a lot of patience, it gives you a lot of virtue, and it gives you a lot of meaning and purpose in life. So I am myself agreeing that the people who deserved less have obtained more. I call such instances as DLOM, DLOM, deserved less, obtained more.
Acha.
So they are there, and because of comparisonitis, our own soul will also get triggered. Our own biology, neurology will get triggered. That
Right.
that person has deserved less but has obtained more.
Right.
What I am saying is that might be true, and because of that, their whatever levels of dopaminergic happiness might be higher.
Hmm.
But as opposed to that, our levels of purpose, meaning in life, and the satiation because of being more human, because of
Hmm.
being connected with humanity more, are much more higher. So we are virtuous, righteous, and we are the ones who are like shouldering the burden of humanity and making humanity go forward as far as it can go, basically, ahead in life.
Hmm.
So
Right.
if you
Right.
are a moral person, you cannot do immoral things. Please understand this.
Right.
You have to stay in the maximally moral lane, irrespective of whoever else is doing whatever, basically. So that
Correct.
is called as moral courage and moral temperance and moral virtue in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you are a moral person, we cannot do immoral things. And the people who are doing immoral things, they keep themselves away from the moral righteousness that we feel. I don't think that, see, for example, people who are in the corn industry, etc., na, they feel very bad about themselves. They don't have
Right.
self-esteem.
Right. Right.
They have very fragile egos, basically.
Hmm.
So they have got only diminishing dopaminergic happiness, only diminishing dopaminergic happiness.
Right.
Okay, and there might be one odd psychopath and sociopath, basically, who might be even happy and even content in that particular world as well. Might be there. We don't know.
Hmm.
But then those exceptions are there. And since they are lucky, we cannot do anything about it, basically. We
Right.
are moral people, so we should just ignore the people who are lucky and morally corrupt.
Hmm.
And that's the best that we can do.
Right.
That is how humanity has evolved to be.
Right.
So what I am saying is our morality and righteousness, which even gives us suffering at times,
Right.
is more precious to us
Hmm.
compared to the dopaminism, basically. Now,
Right.
as a father, any father can think, would there would a person as a father or even as a mother want their daughter to be naked on OnlyFans or participate in corn? Would they
Hmm.
want their child to be indulge in dopaminergic activities like cigarette smoking,
Right.
alcoholism, excess sugar addiction, corn addiction, etc., etc.?
Right. Right.
All the seven deadly sins. Would anybody want that or wish that actively for their child?
They wouldn't. Yeah.
So somewhere inside the human heart and soul, we all know
Right.
what is right and what is wrong, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we know? Why do we know? Because we know the subsequent consequences of engaging in such activity are going to be the demolishment of humanity, or the
Hmm.
collapse of humanity in whatever capacity, basically.
Right. Right.
So we understand that we ourselves don't want to be, and we don't want our loved ones to be agents of chaos.
Correct.
We hence want to follow the maximally moral lane, basically.
Right.
So I am again repeating, on the hedonism plane, they are winning.
Hmm.
But on the purpose plane, on the hedonism plane, we are suffering. But on the purpose plane, in the righteousness and virtue plane, in the being human plane, in the human to human connection, empathy, compassion plane, the morally righteous and virtuous people are winning.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that has to be enough.
Yeah.
And guess what? That is enough also.
Hmm.
That is enough also, basically, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Moral people don't have a choice. They are moral.
Right.
They don't have a choice. Like if somebody tells you that okay, murder somebody and you will get $1 million, you don't have a choice. You will refuse that, basically.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something very deep rooted in the human structure. So I think there is a guy called Raskolnikov, basically.
Hmm.
I think that the book's name is Crime and Punishment. So
Okay.
it's written by Dostoevsky, I think so, right? So
Hmm.
in that, the guy commits a murder, basically, of a
Okay.
very evil person. But then the guy can't come to terms with himself as to how he could do
Acha.
this.
Acha.
I think it's a Dostoevsky novel, Crime
Okay.
and Punishment. Just a second, I'll just check it out. Crime and Punishment.
I have heard of it, Dostoevsky.
Yeah, Fedor Dostoevsky, first published
Yeah.
in 1866. So like 1.5 centuries
Oh,
old. So basically here this guy commits a murder apparently, right?
acha. Right.
Rodin Raskolnikov is the name of the person. He
Okay.
commits a murder and then he can't live with himself, basically,
Hmm.
right? So the people who go towards the immoral side, right, they also can't live with themselves, and hence they have to justify their fragile egos by some cover up story
Okay.
that she did it, so I did it, he did it, so I did it, I was forced to do it, what can I
Right.
do, etc., etc., etc.
Right.
And that's how they become agents of chaos. And even if 95% of the world become like that, still they are wrong only.
Hmm.
Wrong and right is not prejudicated on majority opinion, basically.
Correct. Correct.
Like for example, majority of Nazis thought that they were right in
Correct.
burning and killing Jews, but they were not.
Yeah.
So wrong and right can be objectively existent based upon the longevity of humanity. See, this one thing we have to grant, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we say that longevity of humanity is like we are apathetic towards it and we don't care about it, let's say we don't
Hmm.
care even if humanity perishes in 10 years or something like that, then anything goes.
Correct. Yeah.
But if we are talking about the longevity of humanity and we are talking about, subverting the existential risks, basically, okay,
Right.
then there is good and evil, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then we can define that this act or activity with this intention was good or evil, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
So again, I'm repeating, in the hedonistic pleasure arena,
Hmm.
the morally righteous people are actually losing.
Hmm.
But in
Hmm.
the morality arena, they are winning. That's my point
Yeah.
here, basically.
Yeah. Right.
And that has to be enough. And guess what? That is much more than enough. That is much more than enough. Because
Right.
a person's value is not actually determined by their wealth or status, basically.
Hmm.
It's actually determined by their intentions and their efforts, basically,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
they made for making their life towards heaven from hell, just to use biblical terminology, just to
Right.
explain, like in short, okay,
Right.
their life heavenly from hellish, okay,
Hmm.
in sync with what is correct for humanity.
Right.
That's the idea here, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, a high school teacher in some remote village can be very pure hearted and extremely happy
Hmm.
compared to a tech billionaire who did fraudulent activities. Like, for example,
Right.
Sam Bankman Fried, who did fraudulent activities and tried to loot people.
Hmm.
Let's like take the example of Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
He had a racket, right? He had a
Yeah.
like a predatory racket, basically. So
Yeah.
ultimately, he met his end, basically, right?
Right.
But
Right.
in those 10, 20, 30 years in which he was active, their internet was also not there, basically. Okay. In
Hmm.
those years when he was active, he might have thought that, oh, I am so cool, like I am so powerful, basically, right?
Right, right.
And guess what? Sometimes some people go unpunished as well. That is
Hmm.
the nature of evil on earth, right? Morally
Right,
speaking.
right.
Some people go unpunished as well.
Yeah.
And they might delude themselves into thinking how cool they are.
Hmm.
But then they don't know what they have missed. They have missed a completely moral life.
Right, right.
Because utility can be maximized only by being moral. That's my
Hmm.
claim here.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
So in the hedonism plane, they are ahead.
Right.
In the hedonism plane, they are ahead. I'm telling you.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But now you think about this. Now I'm talking about savoring. Okay. Okay. Let's understand this.
Okay. Right.
Now
Huh.
I'm talking about savoring. Okay. Let's say Jeffrey Epstein had whatever he had with n number of victims, basically, like
Hmm.
500,000, etc.
Right,
But
right.
let us say somebody else is there. They are in a loving relationship with their spouse.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
can potentially savor that loving relationship 1000x or 10,000x more than whatever Jeffrey Epstein had, basically, because it was just a deal, right? It's just a deal. Like
Right,
take X, give X. You cannot buy love. Please understand that
right,
love is something that is given, basically.
right.
One cannot buy love.
Hmm.
One can buy lust, but one cannot buy love.
Correct. Yeah.
One can even buy subservience, but one cannot buy
Hmm.
fealty and loyalty and heart, basically.
Right, right.
So this is exactly what is missed, basically.
Hmm.
So again, I'm repeating, some people may go unpunished because this is a very crucially important point.
Okay.
Some people may go unpunished also. There are many kings of the past who did lots of aristocracies and they went unpunished, basically, and they died a
Right,
natural death also,
right.
right? But then that does not mean that they led a moral life.
Hmm.
And
Right.
they might have, like, they might be psychopaths and sociopaths, and they might have deluded themselves into thinking that since I am in power, I deserve this. But then that is away from the truth, right?
Hmm.
So this is exactly what they missed. The moral fortitude, the moral righteousness, the moral virtuosity is exactly what they missed, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you
Right.
cannot fool yourself into thinking that you are a moral individual. Please understand that.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
And moral individuals don't have a choice. They have to be moral, and that is okay, that is good, that is great. So it's like just like you cannot change your height once you reach a
Yeah.
certain particular height, right? There are bone
Right.
lengthening surgeries, etc., but that should not be adopted by people because they are very risky and mostly ineffective. So just like you cannot change your height, you cannot change that you are a good person. Basically, it depends upon sociological, biological, and personal factors also. But once you are a good person, you have to try to stay good only till the end.
Right.
Otherwise, as a good person, you might feel a lot of regrets. Basically,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
as a moral person, you may not feel regrets.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes you may feel also, basically, if you are wanting to come towards the righteous and the good side of humanity, you may feel
Right.
regrets also.
Right. Right.
But then here, forget about regrets, forget about hedonism, forget about happiness. I am talking about moral righteousness and virtue. This is
Hmm.
a separate plane. This is a
Yeah.
separate plane, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being very high up on that plane makes
Yeah.
much more sense, basically, in the human existence and human experience of life compared to
Right. Right.
not being high on that
Right.
particular plane, basically, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that means that a moral person without choice has to accept whatever his uh, propensity towards being moral is, and he has to enjoy being righteous
Hmm.
and leave
Hmm.
aside the hedonistic people or hedonistic
Right.
activities that he witnesses. He has to leave that aside, basically,
Right. Right.
and he
Yeah.
has to he has to learn to enjoy being virtuous and enjoy being
Hmm.
morally correct, basically, even
Hmm.
though some other people might be involved in hedonism. So that
Right.
hedonism is, and some other, and they might not be punished also, basically, right?
Hmm.
So that
Correct.
is the randomness oriented nature of humanity. So justice doesn't thrive, fairness doesn't thrive, basically, but we want fairness to thrive. Wanting this is also moral virtue.
Hmm. Right.
What wanting fairness to thrive is also moral virtue and moral
Right.
courage,
Correct.
basically.
Correct. Yeah.
So that is the meaning of being ethical and moral, basically, and sticking to the maximally moral lane.
Right.
So we have to enjoy the moral suffering because that gives us moral righteousness and virtue, which is for us, for moral creatures, much more important than hedonistic pleasure.
Hmm.
including the suffering. Even the suffering is worth it, basically. Even
Hmm.
the
Right.
comparisonitis based suffering is worth it.
Right. Right.
Much more worth it. I am again
Right.
repeating this because this needs to be hammered inside like soul, like viscerally hammered inside the psyche of the moral people, right?
Right.
So
Right.
because they are the ones who are actually shouldering the responsibility of humanity. If humanity was left to just evil and immoral people, humanity will just collapse quickly in like 10, 20 years. That is the
Correct.
nature of dopaminism, right?
Correct. Correct.
So basically, the immoral people are letting down their own progeny and letting down the progeny of us also. So it is
Hmm.
up to us to try to prolong you. So think about your 10 generations from now. Now, so you have some responsibility towards them, right?
Yes. Yes.
The gene doesn't care about your happiness. The gene
Hmm.
cares about longevity.
Correct.
That's why even suffering is worth it
Hmm.
because the gene cares about the longevity. So finding
Longevity.
happiness in suffering is the deep rooted meaning of human life, basically.
Hmm.
And one such happiness in suffering is the moral, like suffering because of the comparisonitis of other people who are enjoying hedonism, and we being moral, we cannot enjoy hedonism. So finding happiness in that suffering is one of the deepest philosophical advancements psychologically a human being can go through, basically.
Yes. Yes.
And that gives you a
Right.
different level of power to operate
Right.
at, basically.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Because then you really understand the concept of just being happy with the effort process, basically.
Right. Right.
That's the whole, and rewarding yourself with the effort process rather than actually like what's happening in the world, etc., so on and so forth, basically.
Right. Right.
So people who will be watching this, like, it is my utmost request to stay always moral to the maximal
Hmm.
level that you can in this life,
Yes.
right? Okay. Hmm. I think I have, yeah, min max also we covered, right? Min max in everything is like an important principle here in the
Huh.
ergonomics thing. Yeah, here.
Right. Huh.
So
Right.
I'll mention it though because min max is very important, and I'll also mention phases of life.
Right. Huh.
Min max and phases of
Min-max.
life.
Huh. Okay. I think you've already written min-max there, no?
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. I have already written min max there, but I'm just mentioning it extra because these are some things. Leverage
Right.
delegation I wrote, and I wrote MR. So basically, phases of life may in that climb phase, that MRP is a very important concept. MRP,
Right. Right. Huh. Huh.
MRE, activation energy, or HIIT, high intensity training, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of a thing. I also wrote about supercharging, right? Basically, because of that contrast principle and that
Yes.
supercharging thing, I think we have written. Yes, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes. This is supercharging. Yeah, because
Yeah.
of per
Yeah.
play, because of dopaminism, you are going to supercharge yourself and you are going to extract more value from dopaminism because of the contrast principle, basically.
Correct.
So you can
Correct.
go even 3x, 4x compared to the time. Let's say you have got 10 hours, you can actually derive utility compared to 30 or 40 hours, basically.
Correct. Correct.
If you compare it with a normal, mediocrity or moderate type of individual, basically.
Correct.
So now you are talking about why we should be active and choose the morally righteous path, right? Ethically active and
Mhm.
morally righteous path, right?
Correct.
Basically.
Correct.
So
Correct.
now that I have correlated with the utility that we can derive out of life, basically. You can
Yes.
see
Yes.
that
Yes.
this is like the kind of full picture kind of a thing, basically,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have kind of completed whatever I had to say. Now, if there
Right.
are any discussions points we can discuss next podcast topic. Just let me mention what is the topic. The
Huh.
topic is uh, the topic is startups, startups, and thinking around startups, especially people
Right.
who are students or who are maybe even working professionals and want to go into startups and things like that.
Right. Right.
So that, and then why will a startup win and why will 99% fail, and who should attempt it and who should preferably not attempt it also, because not everybody should attempt it, basically,
Okay. Okay. Great.
like that.
Huh.
One of
Huh.
the things that we are doing in Wintrepreneurship is also establishing a base wherein which we can have a community, basically, that can
Right.
help each other, because networking really helps and supports people, right, in general.
Right. Right.
So,
Huh.
so startups, competitive advantages, who should do it, who should avoid it, who should do it. Now we have got a very solid understanding. So now with
Yeah.
this previous podcast, I think this is podcast number 4, I think, right?
This four. Huh. This four. Yeah.
Yeah. So with this and if you include the earlier democracy one, then that would be 5, basically.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Correct.
The very early, like without face, we
Yes.
had done this one
Yes. Yes.
early.
Yes.
So Now I think the next topic is interesting enough, basically, right? It's like very relevant
Mhm.
and pertinent enough as well,
Right. Yes.
basically.
Yes.
And
Because I think
apparently,
that will also cover the this thing of runway for individuals, etc. Right. So for individuals also, then for
correct.
businesses we covered today also, but for individuals also probably
Right, right,
we
right,
can talk
right,
about that
right.
also. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because see, individual is completely correlated with the business, right? See, basically,
Correct.
this is
Correct.
a business runway model, and
Yeah.
then you also have an individual over here who is making linear in time effort, right?
Yes.
LIT effort.
Yes. 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 Correct.
So individual is also going to have their own runway.
Yeah.
Individual is also going to have their own LIT, and the individual is also going to have their own brand. So an individual is
Mhm.
also like a startup in himself or
Right.
themselves.
Right. Right.
Got it, na?
Right.
So this individual can be considered as like one startup basically, and
Okay.
instead of the commune under him, that will be LIT basically. His linear in time efforts basically. This will be
Right.
just the
Right.
base of the flag will be substituted by LIT, and brand means what? Kind of the social capital that that individual controls or governs.
Correct. Correct.
Social cap. It will be social cap slash professional cap or brand
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So by making these LIT efforts, the
Hmm.
individual is driving this virtuous cycle of startups, basically, if you can think like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
By
Right.
making LIT efforts, individual is driving this startup efforts with respect to whichever startups they are associated with.
Right.
So,
Right.
for example, right now I'm documenting all my thoughts and efficiency-based knowledge for free on YouTube or wherever this will
Hmm.
go, so
Hmm.
that in the future I will get some benefit from the community who will derive benefit from this. So that is that virtual value exchange cycle, basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Correct.
For example, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So anything else to discuss apart from that?
Oh, nothing. Can I let me just go
Y-
back to that slide? Just that
Yeah.
in which you listed down everything, right? The min max and
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah. The
phase
efficiency technique with respect to, yeah.
ah,
Yeah.
so wait. Integrated living ergonomic spaces. I guess maybe one of the future sessions we can talk more about that leverage delegation because that is something that
We,
doesn't
we
come
can
very
we can
easily.
have we can have an entire podcast on each one of these actually. Like
Yeah,
there
yeah,
is so
makes
much to talk about actually.
correct,
I
correct,
have
yeah,
I'm just writing down like I have got 2-3 pages worth of notes with respect to each
right,
one also basically.
right, yeah,
So I am just like kind of writing them down as plug points for the future, basically. So
right,
I
right,
told you that there is a lot of value to be documented here,
yes,
basically.
yes.
Okay, in
Actually, I
rest
mean,
and
it
sleep
does.
also there is min max. For example, in sleep also you need some minimum hours of sleep, and then you should not exceed some
Mhm.
max beyond some
Correct,
maximum hours of sleep,
correct,
basically.
correct, correct.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think makes I mean, there's a lot to think about. Like, oftentimes it also happens that I'm going back and then I connect this and I know you
Correct,
for a while, right? So
correct, correct.
it's also very interesting, kind of
Hmm.
taking your like we've been discussing a lot about ethics and what is morally right and all that, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
seeing our past experiences through those lenses like really mind blowing now, because
Correct, correct.
I knew I know you, I've known you for a while and things you've done, right? But now seeing
Hmm.
that through the moral lens and how it even fits that has been like it's been like
Hmm.
there's been a
Hmm.
lot of like light bulb moments in the last
Hmm.
week. So I think yeah, there'll be more, I'm sure, the
Hmm.
coming
Hmm. Hmm.
days.
And if somebody literally, because you can see that this is not at all copy pasted from anywhere. These are my completely raw
Correct.
original thoughts, basically. Now we
Yeah.
will document them and then publish blog articles and so on and so forth, basically.
Right.
So
Right.
the
Yeah.
idea is if somebody goes through this literature, it is a very complete study. And of course,
Mhm.
like some amount of personal efficacy based literature should be there on the internet for free, right? For see,
Yes.
there are 8 billion of us so that people can learn and grow and share knowledge and things like that, basically. So something that is complete. See, a lot of fragmented literature is there. Like, for example, 7 habits of highly effective people will talk
Mhm.
about some part of it, like basically, like
Correct.
atomic habits will talk about some part of it, basically, like that.
Correct.
So
Correct.
everything under one roof, and as well as integrating it with the ethical theory as to why,
Yes.
basically, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Integrating it with L side, R side behavior, having some models and frameworks of ethics, and then relating it with business life, business efficacy, and so on and so forth. Because
Mhm.
see, everything you do in life has an entrepreneurial nature. A person might not know about their balance sheet, but it exists. A
Hmm.
person might not know the Pythagoras theorem, but it exists, right?
Right,
Basically.
right,
So
right.
a person might not have thought in terms of cash flow statements, income statements, etc., but they
Correct,
exist in their life, in the life of the person.
correct, correct.
So I think next podcast we will talk also about like that investing principles, or maybe that will be a subsequent podcast after the startups, basically. So
Okay, okay,
so next will be startups and business principles, and after that we'll move on to investing principles, basically.
okay. Sure, sure. So
Yeah.
Tuesday
And
we'll.
yeah, what you can do in the meanwhile is you can tell me small topics out of whatever I have documented and tell me to make individual videos out of them, just
Right.
solo explanatory videos, basically, so that
Got it, got
the
it.
concepts are syncing well with the audience,
Yes,
basically.
yes, yes, yes. Right.
All right?
Which will
Yeah.
be necessary also. I think some of them we can go. We have a nice overview of many, many things now. So some of them we can go
Correct.
deeper.
And once I go through the startup and the investment processes thing, right, we'll
Yeah,
have an even wider, bigger overview. And after
correct.
even, I will even tell you the topics. You can even write it down. So after
Right,
startup, business overview, after that we will move on to global problems, basically.
right. Okay, sure, sure.
So we'll start with currency. You know, I still have that discussion. One discussion we had in, I think, Grand
Hi,
Hyatt in Santa
Grand
Cruz.
Hyatt. Correct, correct.
So again, we'll have a proper podcast-based discussion on currency,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes,
So
yes,
starting with currency and then starting with geopolitics, etc., and then
yes.
starting with like what how the global problems are interconnected and what are the correct theoretical solutions. See,
Right,
execution is a separate issue, basically.
right, right. Correct.
But guess what? If you want a one line summary, the tribalism, basically, that's the one word summary of whatever is wrong with the world, basically.
Right,
Because
right.
if tribalism could be solved, then all things are solvable, basically. That is the
Hmm.
most difficult one to solve. If one word
Right.
summary of global problems, if we want,
Oh,
then it's tribalism,
okay,
basically.
okay, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm. So now startups, then after that investments, after that currency, because then currency will be correlated with investments, see, basically,
Okay,
right?
okay. Right, right.
Currency, and after currency, other global problems, basically, like for example, dissolution of countries, etc. So we'll
Hmm.
see how to go about that. But 2, 3, 4 will be on global problems essentially. Then we
Okay.
would have documented the index, you can say. Then after
Right.
some 5, 7 podcasts from now, we would have finished documenting the index. Now it's
Correct,
up to
correct.
you basically what to zoom down into, basically.
Yes, yes. Makes sense. Got it, got it.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Cool.
Okay. Okay. We'll end for today. Bye. Take
Okay,
care.
bro. Yeah. Okay. Take care. Then. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.